Welcome.
Citizens access.
Welcome to this, yes, quiet please. Welcome to the fifth meeting of the Planning Board for fiscal year 2014. We're meeting today with the Master Plan Committee. And so what we're going to do is we're going to introduce ourselves, then we're going to go down there and then down there, and everyone's going to introduce themselves for the viewing audience because we are being televised live and recorded so that whatever you say is going to be reviewable. I'm Alex Whiteside, the chairman.
Alex, wait, before we finish introductions, we're also calling to order the first meeting of the Milton Master Plan Committee for fiscal year 2014.
All right, well, you can do that.
I just did. You should do it before you do the introductions.
All right.
Bernie Lynch, and this is the first time we've used this room with this new center, so let's hope it works.
Same old people, though.
I'm Wallace Sisson.
I'm Cheryl Tagayas.
I'm Michael Blute.
My name is Dick Burke.
Paul Travers. Tom Hurley. Tabor Keeley.
Mike Kelly, Planning Board member.
Ed Duffy, Planning Board.
Emily Ennis, Planning Board.
All right, now, we're not going to do any minutes tonight. We are going to meet on the 26th in the John Cronin Conference Room, where we're going to have a hearing on a subdivision proposal for the site of the Women's Club. Now we're going to do citizens speak, at which citizens have an opportunity to address the board on matters of pertinence to the board. What citizens would like to speak? Yes, ma'am. Introduce yourself and speak into the microphone.
Hello everyone, I'm Vicki McCarthy, Youth Councilor Emeritus for the Town of Milton, and I'm here today to represent a subcommittee of the Milton Women's Club. So I know that the Planning Board does have the letter that I'm just going to read tonight because I know your time is valuable. So I'm just going to read this, and I know in a couple of weeks we'll have a chance to come back.
Could you hear this, Mike? Okay, good.
And a couple of the other focus group members are here with me behind me. To the members of the Milton Planning Board, from Mary Harkin Sullivan, past president, Milton Women's Club, 1984-1986, regarding the possible demolition of the historic building at 190 Reedsdale Road. September 12, 2013. The Milton Women's Club was founded in 1898 and incorporated in 1913. Its purpose, among others, to provide civic betterment in the town of Milton. Throughout its history, the club has organized, facilitated, and promoted charitable missions, from raising money for victims of the 1906 San Francisco earthquake to establishing a tuberculosis clinic in the early part of the 20th century, to creating the town of Milton's first free hot lunch program at the public schools, to establishing and equipping playgrounds in Milton. The club's charitable mission continues to this day. The club has contributed tens of thousands of dollars in scholarships, provided seed money for program development, and supplied the willing labor to make possible the establishment of many programs we have in our town to serve the people. The club's meeting place, its primary and essentially sole asset and its primary source of revenue, is the clubhouse on Reedsdale Road in Milton. A focus group was formed early this year when it came to the attention of our membership that the current board of directors purported to sell the clubhouse. The sale was not done through the open market, nor was there a vote of the membership. The board initially declined to identify the purported buyer. Neither the sale nor the contemplation of a sale was put out to a vote to the club's members, even though there were other interest from a community organization, Temple Shalom of Milton. Unfortunately, the temple, in its many attempts to contact the officers of the Milton Women's Club, was rebuffed in that the officers of the Milton Women's Club did not respond to the temple's communications and went forward with a buyer-developer who was introduced through another source. The board of directors of the club acknowledged its error of not taking the vote of the entire membership and called a special meeting, in their thinking, to correct the situation. The board asked the members of the corporation of the Milton Women's Club to vote in favor of the developer's offer, still not making clear to the members that there was a similar offer from the Temple on the table. The focus group wonders why these few members representing the entire club were in favor of a private developer's purchase instead of making the property available for a community center, such as the Temple or like organization, as it has always been, or even giving the members a choice of which offer to take. Because we believed that the board's attempt to sell the clubhouse violated the Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 180, Section 8A, I brought the issue to the Attorney General's office and reported that the club did not satisfy its obligations as a charitable organization to that office concerning a potential sale. In fact, the Milton Women's Club had not satisfied the obligation to the AG's office and is now attempting to file the proper paperwork. Our club, like similar clubs across the country, may be moving toward a new chapter. However, the direction we take should, in our opinion, benefit the town of Milton and its residents. Certainly, additional taxes in the form of 4 or 5 new housing units would be beneficial. However, there is a history here of hundreds and hundreds of women working diligently throughout the last 100 years to make the town of Milton a better place to live for all its residents, not just 4 or 5 new families. The Temple had given the focus group reasonable assurance that if they purchased our historic building, the Temple would continue to allow various social, religious, and fraternal organizations, etc., to continue to meet, so they may continue to help the town prosper financially, physically, and spiritually. As a member of the focus group, a past president of the Milton Women's Club, and a lifelong resident of the town of Milton, I ask that the planning board give a fair hearing to decide what is best for the town of Milton and all its residents, not just the few who, in our opinion, have steered the Women's Club in a direction that would substantially disappoint its founders. Thank you for your consideration.
Okay, thank you. We're going to have a public hearing on a subdivision proposal 2 weeks from today. What time is it going to be at? 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock, and this letter you've read is not in the record, and if you want to put it in the record, then you may do so. Okay. Anyone else for citizen speak? If not, we will go on to, Mr. Clark, what are we going to go on to?
You're about to get some packets when you leave tonight. One of these is for 90 Reedsdale Road, the subdivision that's going to be at the Women's Club. Part of that is that 4-house subdivision requires more stormwater review than our DPW can handle at the moment. So we're going to send it out for third-party review. The person that will be doing it will be Lisa Eggleston. She did the stormwater at Milton Hill project. The DPW is very comfortable with her. They like working with her, and they have asked that we use Lisa.
Okay, paid for by the developer.
Yes.
In advance or not?
I'm sorry?
In advance or not?
In advance, we asked for a $5,000 check, and
Fine.
we'll put that into an account. Whatever's left over gets put back to the developer.
All right.
It's given back.
We will entertain a motion to do just what Mr. Clark has suggested.
I'll make that motion.
Okay.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Sullivan, for your help, and we will, now, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Mrs. Innes, because she is the planning board's liaison coordinator for master planning. So it's your meeting until we get to the end.
Okay, fair enough. Great. We have a busy night ahead of us. We've got 3 consultant teams that are coming in to interview for the second phase of our master plan. We're going to have Community Circle at 6:45, VHB at 7:30, and Brown Walker at 8:15. That gives each group about 45 minutes. They should be giving us roughly a 20-minute presentation, and then we'll have 25 minutes for this whole group to ask questions. I'll be keeping an eye on the clock to make sure that we're on time. I understand there's a few sporting events tonight that have been passed my way, but so we should finish up right about 9 o'clock with Brown Walker. After that, we'll have a little bit of a discussion, and then the planning board will be voting tonight. Just to emphasize, master plan committee, you get to ask all the questions we can, give us your thoughts at the end. The planning board, however, makes the final vote. And then, once we have our preferred developer, the master plan committee, will get in touch and start setting up our first meetings to work. So, right before we start, we've got a couple of minutes just to let you know, I have a few disclosures because I actually work in the planning field. I have filed them with the town clerk, but just to let you know that my firm, the Cecil Group, does partner with other firms from time to time, has partnered with some of these firms in the past. We're not currently partnered with any of these firms that are here before us tonight, but some of them we have done in the past. Also, to let you know that one of the teams, the Brown Walker HSH team, Brown Walker, of course, did phase 1 of our master plan. I found out after we'd chosen them that one of the members used to work for the Cecil Group, although not while I was here. They then hired somebody else who had worked for my firm, although not while I was there. On HSH side's Ted Brovitz, their project manager. I did work with him at the Cecil Group, and he has been a peer reviewer for a project that I've been involved in, and has peer reviewed my work. Because I haven't received any financial benefit from any of these firms, I feel that I am able to make a decision without a conflict of interest, so that's why I've disclosed it to the town clerk and disclosed it to you. Bill, is Community Circle here? Excellent. Then we will get started.
Hello.
Hello, welcome.
Thank you. Just a moment while we set up.
Absolutely.
Emily, which group is this?
This is Community Circle, so for those of you who have your proposals or has printed them out, it should look like
Everyone
this.
better have.
Yes. Certainly, the planning board was given strict instructions to bring our proposals.
This must be community circle.
He designed the intersection.
Oh, yeah.
Anthony.
Sorry, just pretend we're not here yet.
Not a problem at all.
Right, well, we could,
On, Alex.
Password free internet.
So, Bill, are you going to formally introduce us?
No, fine, I will, because
I'll introduce us, and so you know who you're facing here, and then let you guys introduce yourselves. So I'm Emily Innes, one of the members of the planning board. Alex Whiteside is the chairman of the planning board. I'm also the liaison to the master committee. So the people at this end of the table are the planning board, the people along the sides are the master plan committee, and we are looking forward to your proposal.
Could we ask you, once you introduce yourselves, to just say in just 5 words or less what you hope to get out of this master plan?
A good job.
Well, Bernie, I'll let you start. Introduce yourself, and
KISS, keep it simple.
Wally.
Wally.
I'm just comparing the 3 plans, and then I'll make some decisions afterwards.
My name is Cheryl Tagayas, and I'm looking forward to a comprehensive look at the town, what works well, and where we might make some improvements.
Mike Lutz, I'm a representative of the Conservation Commission.
My name is Dick Burke. I'm on the Master Plan Committee. More interest. I'd be interested in seeing, your thoughts as to the direction this town should be going, and based upon your experience with similar type towns.
I'm Paul Travis from the Chamber of Commerce, Chamber of Commerce, and I'm looking for the future of Milton to grow.
Tom Hurley, I'm on the Board of Selectmen and Selectmen's representative to the Master Plan Committee. And similar to what Cheryl and everybody else has said, we're looking for, future in the town of Milton, economic growth and keeping a certain character to the town that we've always had and maintaining that to the degree we can.
Bill Clark, I'm the planning director, and I'm going to let the rest of the committee talk.
I'm Tabor Keeley, Planning Commission new tonight, but I guess I should say that I'm looking for some advice from you to how to bring us into the 21st century. I think that Milton has been behind on planning for many years, and we don't have an awful lot of industrial or commercial development, and I'd like to see if there's any way we could do something about increasing the tax base.
Mike Kelly, Planning Board member, and just looking for positive ideas for the future of Milton.
Yeah, Duffy, Planning Board.
Ellen Denoyer, I'm an architect on the Master Plan Committee. I'm really interested in a really good community process and an outcome that can be implemented. Because I think implementation is really important.
Is Ed done?
And Ed has done his, yes.
Alex Whiteside, I'm looking for a thoughtful discussion of all the elements of the master plan, which actually are going to be helpful to the town in the future. A excellent, thoughtful planning effort is what we want, and hopefully what we'll get.
Thank you. So why don't we continue by introducing ourselves. I'm Daphne Politis. I'm principal of Community Circle. I'm a trained planner. I received my degree at MIT. Won't tell you how many years ago. I also am a trained facilitator and certified mediator. I've worked for almost 30 years in a couple of dozen of municipalities, helping them to identify and then figure out how to preserve what they like, and then identify and figure out how to change where they feel there's room for improvement. I mean, that's really, in general, what a master plan is, and in general, it's about how to make a place a better place, to make it a place for people to live in, to work in, to play in. And it's something that's very close to my heart. I really enjoy doing it, and you'll ask our references, and you'll see that we're good at doing it. I'd like to ask the rest of you.
I'm Angus Jennings. I'm principal of a sole proprietor consulting firm based in Concord. My background, I was the Marshfield Town Planner from 2001 to 2005, which was a period of rapid growth and quite a lot going on, and was directly involved in 31 bylaw amendments during my 4 years there. So I've spent a lot of time with town meeting, building consensus around a whole range of planning issues. I then spent about 5 years in consulting with Concord Square Planning and Development, which is a small Boston-based firm. We did a lot of work around the state, both zoning and planning facilitation. And my colleague, my former boss, was a real expert on development finance. So we really looked at zoning that attempted to take into account the feasibility of a particular site or location. So implementation is kind of baked into the bread of how I do my work. I left Concord Square in early 2010 to become the Director of Land Use Management in the town of Westford, where I spent about 3 years, and in that role I oversaw the town planning, building, zoning, and conservation departments during also an extremely rapid period of growth. And I, in addition to being very involved with the day-to-day of both permitting and construction oversight, I had the lead role for the town on a whole host of planning, policy, infrastructure management issues. I'm also trained as a mediator and facilitator through the Massachusetts Office of Dispute Resolution. I'm on the board of the Massachusetts Association of Planning Directors. After having served as president last year and 2 years as vice president, I'm just on the board in order to free up time for my business. And I included a different photo on the slide than what you have in your proposal, because this is the Angus Jennings that Bill probably remembers, because this is 12 years ago, and Bill was actually the South Coast coordinator for MAPC, so I thought that would, I thought he would appreciate that.
Haven't changed a bit, have you, Angus?
Is that you in the center?
Yes. Haven't changed a bit.
Oh, and I should say, 6 of the projects that I've managed as a consultant, actually 5 as a consultant and 1 in the public sector, 4 as a consultant, 2 in the public sector, have been recognized with statewide planning awards.
I meant to bring a scarf to play Martha. Unfortunately, she couldn't be here tonight. She's in California, actually on a possible project. So I would like to tell you a few things about her. She's a very integral part of our team. She's our designer. She is a landscape architect by training. She also does urban design. She brings her design sense to every part of the project and every part of the process, but she's particularly responsible for open space and recreation, natural resources, and cultural and historic resources. And she has a lot of sensitivity towards historic landscapes, which has a very broad definition. And I've learned through her not to fear or hold my breath when going by cemeteries. She loves historic cemeteries. And she's really a wonderful, I wish you could meet her, and hopefully you will. So we also have another absentee.
My name is Jay Doyle, and I work for AECOM, and we will be leading the transportation and infrastructure elements of the project. And before I say anything more about myself, though, I want to introduce Jeff Maxtudis, whose photo is there and in the proposal, but not here. He had a long-planned family commitment on the West Coast, and so he couldn't make it. But he will be leading the transportation planning elements of the study. And let me just tell you a little bit about Jeff. I've had the pleasure of working with Jeff for the last 13 plus years, directly on virtually every project we work on at AECOM in transportation. And he and I are both transportation planners by training, and we really love transportation as a profession. We've collaborated on a number of studies at the municipal level, the regional level, for transit authorities, regional transit authorities, large and small, as well as Mass DOT. He's very engaging. He loves what he does, and I think that's really evidenced by the fact that he's so engaged at the local level in his own community, even in transportation planning. He's for 10 plus years he's been chair or co-chair of the Arlington Transportation Advisory Committee. He's very active in that regard. He's also an expert in safe routes to school in that program. He's led projects for us in other states as well as in his own community for safe routes to school, and one of his other particular areas of expertise is traffic calming, complete streets. So I would really, I think you should really look forward to having the opportunity to work with Jeff. I know I do. Just quickly about myself, I'm primarily in transportation planning on the transit side. So our skills complement each other. Jeff is more of a traffic planner. I'm more of a transit planner, multimodal background. I'm also involved at the community level in my town on the Traffic and Sidewalk Committee, and also the technical practice leader for AECOM in New England on transit planning and traffic. So we look forward to the rest of the presentation, your questions.
So this is the formal organizational chart, but really the way we operate is we're not a very traditional kind of team. We're more like the spokes of a wheel. In this particular project, I happen to be project manager, which means I'm the main contact person. I'm also in charge of public participation and public facilities and services. And Angus is in charge of the housing and economic development. When I say in charge, it means leading that portion. And then Jay and Jeff are doing the transportation element. But we're all leading those portions, and we work together so that we try to immerse ourselves in each other's elements, and we try to make this as integrated a product as we can. And in order to do that, we make the process very integrated. And so we work together, and we include the client in that process as part of that flow. And so we're not like a traditional firm which says, okay, we got to get some work, and then we got to figure out who needs billable hours, and let's give it to them. Instead, we say, all right, what kind of skills does this project need? And we're not always the same people. We try to suit the project needs. And then we put together a team based on what we perceive those needs to be. And we have specialists in each of those areas, and each of the specialists leads that portion. But we're all equally seasoned, we're all equally accessible to the client, and we really, I mean, what we provide, we think, is a superior product, because you will get about 90% of principal time. You won't be getting junior planners on this project. It's us. We do all the work. And that's why we were actually a little disappointed that you couldn't meet the rest of the team, because it's really important, because this is who we are. And so we have very low overhead, which means that all of the hours are work hours for you. So you get a lot more out of your buck, if you will. So that's just to say. So our project approach. Through the years, we've developed a very specific approach, which we then apply and customize to each place. And a master plan has three main components. It's the vision and goals, which is what is it that you want? It's the existing conditions inventory, which is what is it that you have? And then it's the implementation plan. How do you get from where you want, from what you have to where you want? In very specific action steps. Who's going to do it? If it's going to cost money, where's that going to come from? What's most important? What's easy to do, low cost, easy action? So we get, what do you want? What do you have? Assess the potential of what you have, and then how are you going to get there? So that's really the main approach. And in this particular case, you've done the preliminary vision. We consider it to be preliminary because you've said so, but also because we need to feel that we've confirmed and validated it with the people who were involved initially, but also we may do some, we would plan to do some additional outreach to people who were not there in formulating that vision and set of goals. So we consider it to be preliminary, but a lot of the work for that piece of it has been done about what it is that you want. And also, if you look at what the goals that came out of Phase 1 are, they're very consistent with the 2004 comprehensive goals, but even, in some cases, with your 1974 plan. So it's not as if there was a big surprise there, but we still would want to be sure to confirm and validate and refine those goals.
This slide speaks a bit further to the point Daphne was making, and I'll speak a bit more later in the presentation on the approach that I took in the town of Westford. But to put it in a nutshell, when I was hired in 2010, in January 2010, the town had adopted a comprehensive master plan about 6 months previously. We adopted an updated open space and recreation plan in 2010 and an updated housing plan in 2011. And there were also, there was a watershed plan that was done in 2007. There was a public facilities master plan. And as Director of Land Use Management, I really felt both an interest and a professional and ethical obligation to be part of coordinating all of this, because it was very clear when I got there that there was a lot of, it's a very a great deal of grassroots engagement in Westford, and a lot of very hardworking volunteers, people pushing things forward, but there wasn't a coordination. And in fact, there were certainly times where public committees were at cross purposes. So what I tried to do is to establish good faith and credibility with the range of parties and create a dynamic whereby we could be pulling together. So part of what we did is to take the 126 action items that were in the comprehensive master plan, put it into actual staffing plan, distribute that among all of the department heads, and get their input on both what they had done, what their assessment of the status of completion. Some things were actually already complete, some were in process, and others hadn't begun. And then to invite who wanted to be a lead role, who wanted to be a support role, and who simply wanted to be in the loop. They didn't need to be at the table, they just wanted to be in the loop as that issue went forward. So this took really a couple of department head meetings to implement, and then a lot of phone calls to get all of the department heads to respond. But I got all of the department heads to respond, and that led to, I'll just pass these around. I'll pass a few each way. But basically, we did a comprehensive assessment of where we stood on implementation of the plans that had already been adopted, because there was impetus at that time to adopt new priorities, and I was there saying, let's look at what we've got, because really there's, I didn't want to see the resources diluted. So I'm personally extremely focused on implementation, and having sat in Bill's chair for 7 years of my career, I've seen the frustration in the public when they say, well, the plan says this, and why aren't you doing this? And so it's very important to prioritize and put your staff resources toward getting things done. So that's a big part of, Daphne and I work very closely together on that.
So when we reviewed the Phase 1, it seemed that these focus areas came out, and some of them are goals, some of them are opportunities, and some of them are geographic areas. So a lot of this crisscrosses, and it needs further articulation, and there's a lot of good work that's already begun, even in terms of collecting information that will help us to articulate objectives, because once we have the vision and the goals, we need to start outlining objectives so that we can then develop strategies about how to achieve those goals. So these are some of the areas, and we can talk about them later. So in terms of the existing conditions inventory, so you have the vision, the preliminary vision, and the preliminary goals. Then we have to work on, well, what resources do you have? And we need to assess them. We need to document them and begin assessing them in terms of their opportunities and in terms of their challenges. And how do we do that? We begin by reviewing all relevant existing documents. So you have the 1974 plan, you have the 2004 plan, you have the housing production plan, affordable housing plan, and other relevant studies. We look at those, we see how we don't want to duplicate effort, we don't want to waste any resource, we want to build on what you have. And then we do a lot of leadership interviews. We talk with town department heads one-on-one, and we get, sometimes they have studies tucked away, in their drawers that you won't get unless you pay them a visit. Also, paying a visit is really good for the public facilities and services element that I'm leading, because that's when you get a real sense of what is the facility, what is the service provided, what are the deficiencies, and also you can compare and contrast, because everyone feels that theirs is most important. So the site visit is critical. And these are the elements. They're pretty much state determined. We like to do housing, and we like to do it as housing and neighborhoods, and in this particular case, it looks like Milton has a real neighborhood orientation and distinct neighborhoods, so that would work well for you. So, public engagement. It's something we spend a lot of time thinking about, a lot of time doing. We begin the public engagement process by sitting down together with you. We will not say ahead of time what it is that we will do. We need to talk about, first of all, what works and what doesn't work in this community, what worked and what didn't work in Phase 1 and in other public processes that you've engaged in. We also want to talk about who is difficult to get to participate, which stakeholder groups, whether they be ethnic and racial minorities, whether they be elderly, whether they be parents with small children, and we've developed different ways of accessing them. So the first thing we do is have a long discussion with all of you about all those items and more, and then we develop a detailed outreach and participation plan. And we say, who are the stakeholders, what are the best ways of accessing them, and then we start to figure out different forums that are discrete possibilities. So these are public forums that everyone can attend, interviews, focus groups, but then also more ongoing participation opportunities, such as online. Now, online, there are a lot of different ways of giving people the opportunity. We feel that it should never be a substitute for face-to-face. Face-to-face is, the world is changing, but humans are not. Mm-hmm. So the world has changed and continues to change. Humans have changed very little. Face-to-face is really the way we communicate best. So when we add those online tools, they're really adding a supplement. They're not replacing. And actually, there's a lot of talk about them, but for example, Mind Mixer is a very interesting tool. They're out of Omaha, Nebraska. They provide a platform where you can ask people questions, put photographs, ask them to respond, and then they compile all of the input, and it's very useful. It accesses mostly young men and women with small children who, after they put them to bed, they can go online. It costs a lot of money. It requires a lot of advertising, because you could put that there, and if nobody knows it's there, nobody visits. So I actually know a few communities, one of them is my own, Lexington, that uses it. And I go on and I look, and there are some questions that nobody says anything about. There are others where there are 12 responses. So one has to think about the resources and the best use of those resources. I happen to run Facebook pages in a few master plans, and that's about the same group that we're accessing. Young men and women who put their children to bed and go online. So Facebook is a lot less expensive. It's a lot more on the consultant, because we have to go through daily and compile. But, maybe that resource is better spent in another way. Maybe it's better spent by going to the senior center and talking to seniors face to face. So anyway, these are the kinds of things we want to talk about. We also want to talk about the way we organize public forums. So we always try to provide multiple opportunities for people. Some people, because again, we're all human, some feel comfortable speaking in a group, others don't. So we always try to provide opportunities for the full range of comfort. There's always something for those who don't feel comfortable speaking in front of others. We introduce technology where we think it's going to be useful. We don't introduce it just to have a gadget. I mean, we do things that are fun, and you'll find out. I mean, we really try to have fun, and we like to make the process fun and enthusiastic, and but we don't just introduce a gadget just to introduce it. So, for example, those the keypad polling, that can be fun, and it can be very useful in certain situations. But it's also a resource that we want to, spend judiciously. We want to think about, is this the best way to get at what we want to do? So there's a lot more to talk about in that area, but we'll get to it.
So I'll just speak briefly to the graphics that are up on the screen. This we had as part of the posters that I handed around. We had in both 2011 and 2012 a townwide strategic planning retreat, which was actually called for as one of the 126 action items. So I really spearheaded that, and we got everyone together, and it was specific in the plan that they wanted an all town, all board, all committee, and it specifically said not just the chairs, and that told me something accurate about how Westford had been running, and so we really broke that open, had a very inclusive process, and what you see here is from the first year, and what we had was actually the 126 action items broken down by topic area, and people got to vote what they thought was most important. What you see here, which has a higher production value, was the second year, which was by the time we had really integrated the department heads and gotten a sense not just of priorities, but also where we were on status of implementation. So I just wanted to say, sure.
Angus, just one question.
Yeah.
You had a tent party.
We did.
I thought that was intriguing. You
Yes.
had hundreds of people there, open sides.
Yep. We were fortunate. Kimball's Farm, for people who know Westford, it is it's a multi-state destination, so we're very fortunate to have a facility like that. But there's one concept that we have in here of meeting people where they're at, which we all feel very strongly about. You can't just have meetings at town hall, and I mean, you need to have some meetings at town hall, but it's very important to understand in the community, where do people go? And I've worked in communities where that's the tavern, so you have a meeting at the tavern, and however it works, I think that's and so in Westford, Kimball's was a place where the location itself was a draw.
And also the location itself can, it can just make it more accessible, not just in terms of people being able to walk there, but in terms psychologically. Some people feel that town hall is a place that intimidates them. Actually, some people even feel that schools intimidate them. There are a lot of groups that feel that way, and those of us who don't feel that way have a hard time understanding that, perhaps. But I've spoken to a lot of people who said, wow, I've never been to one of these meetings ever before. And I say, well, why did you come to this one? And it's because it wasn't at the school. We once had a meeting in Tingsboro in a crafts fair, in the middle of the crafts fair. We had over 150 people that we talked to. We've held them everywhere. And walking meetings. So, for example, when you want to talk about, say, one of your business districts, people don't necessarily pay attention to the things that are plannerly or design oriented. But when you're walking and talking, you might say, well, what is it that you like? What is it that you don't like? What are the things you would like to replicate if this were to be redesigned? And it's much easier to point to or to be in the space. So kind of walking meetings can be very useful. So the place of a meeting is as important as what you do there, what the purpose is, and the tools you use. Here you see we also have there are focus groups and round table discussions. There up in the top corner on the right is Fall River. We had a public facilities and services round table. That's the police chief. That drawing there is from New Bedford. We had a drawing contest in the school system, and we had a lot of children whose parents did not speak English well enough that they felt comfortable attending, but we had the children do interviews of their parents and do the questionnaires, and we integrated into the school curriculum. Did a lot of things there that helped to bridge those obstacles.
Okay, so really, we don't want to beat a dead horse, but we've. I think that the summary is that we are conversant or fluent in a wide range of high-tech, low-tech, no-tech strategies, and also size of groups. We've highlighted just a couple of things here with roundtable discussions, whether that's by topic, by constituent group, or by location, and it really depends on the topic that's being discussed, what's most appropriate, and this idea of meeting people where they are, and really trying to engage people who may not spend a lot of time engaged in town hall. And I think the graphic to the right is very interesting. I'll let Daphne speak to that.
So this is in the town of Acton, where we did a major outreach effort. And as part of that, we developed banners with a logo for the master plan. And these banners hung in off the street lamps behind town hall, behind the library. And then we also had big banners across the main streets whenever we were having a large public forum. And the logo became, we do logos in all of our planning processes, but this particular one, a lot of people were involved in forming it. And then it became something they really owned, and people reacted very positively to it. So, it became T-shirts, it became refrigerator magnets, it became hats. It took on a life of its own, I have to say.
So Emily?
I just wanted to say we've got about 15 minutes left. I want to make sure we don't leave.
Okay, let's go through this. So, okay, so.
So quickly, youth participation is a major part of what we do, and we've done that in, maybe 15, 20 communities in a variety of different ways.
So we did want to speak to sustainability a bit, and we won't go through the detail on the slide, but in general, we put a concept into the proposal based on a book, The Ecology of Commerce, which really speaks to the idea of trying to align the interests between public and private sector to where through public policy or other regulatory incentives, the most profitable action should also be, if you do it right, the action with the least environmental footprint. There shouldn't be a disincentive for people to comply with the regulation. Now, we're not there yet societally, but that's where a lot of places are trying to get to. And that's something that we feel strongly about, and where much of, at least a significant part of master plan implementation that takes place over the course of years through project permitting. I think getting the regulations and the processes in place that provide incentives for the type of investment that you'd like to see, and disincentives or don't encourage investment that is going to exacerbate concerns about environmental issues, that's something that we feel very strongly about. And there's some other issues just in terms of how we would actually go about things. But in the interest of time, we'll skip through that. I did speak to this earlier in terms of essentially the staffing plan associated with the master plan implementation. What the plan included was simply a list and, frankly, a very superficial statement of, is it, easy, medium, or difficult, and there was no assignment of accountability, and there was just a broad public expectation that, well, the planning board does this, but when you read it, it's such a host of issues that, I said at the first retreat that for this to work, we are all the master plan implementation committee. Every board, every committee, every department has to take ownership of the issues that are within its sphere and engage with the others, because there is a lot of connectivity, a lot of interrelationship.
So before you go there, I just wanted to add one thing about the implementation, because it is a very, very important, it is really where everything comes together. And often we're asked, well, we've done planning processes before, and some of these issues have come up, and we've noticed that you have some overlap from your 2004 community development plan and the vision that you developed in phase 1. Well, it didn't happen then. Why should we believe in this planning process? Well, the response that we have to that is that we take a lot of pride and care in developing an implementation plan that means something. And how do we do that? We spend a lot of time with the people who are to implement it. Mm-hmm. And we ask them, is this doable here in Milton? Mm-hmm. Who's going to do it? Do you want to do it? Do you want to do it? What kind of resources do you think you'll need? And sometimes ideas that we feel very strongly about, we have to let go of. Because if they're not going to work, they're not going to work. And the other thing we do is we just finished a master plan in the town of Southbridge, where we brought together under each goal a round table, and where we included state agencies, nonprofits, town officials, residents, anyone who had an interest in seeing that goal achieved. And partnerships were formed at that roundtable, and people started to work on addressing the issues before we even finished the plan. And there were people in the room who'd never met each other who were working on the same things. So we really try to make the process part of the product. In other words, we don't just give you a report that is a roadmap. It's moving already, and we hope to give it momentum so that when you take it, you run with it.
So you had a list in the proposal of the prior work samples. We're certainly happy to speak to any of that. And we've got just a couple of slides on project samples. We'll just run, we won't speak to these.
Unless you ask us questions.
But, public participation is inherent to all the work we do. This is some work that...
Yeah, this is an example of a project that AECOM led, working for the City of Cambridge. We planned and designed a new roundabout within the City of Cambridge near the Belmont line, and incorporates a lot of the types of features that I was referring to earlier in terms of traffic calming and the integration of complete streets and sustainability. So it's
and
just
I
one
have
of
to
the
say
projects.
that Jeff
Yeah.
is really into walking and biking, and I was telling Jay on the way over here that he was really reminding me of traveling with Jeff, because when we're driving along, I'm looking at everything else except the road. And Jeff is always saying, a bike lane wouldn't really work here.
Fortunately, Jeff was driving, so
Yeah.
he was looking at the road. So we have a number of points on what we feel sets us apart. I think in the interest of getting to questions, perhaps I'll leave these up here, but we really, we feel we have a diverse team of best-in-class professionals. We all work very hard to stay at the leading edge of our respective fields. We're creative, imaginative, and there's full engagement, and we're very fortunate to have the partnership with AECOM, which obviously has a tremendous capacity, so we're able to draw on the full breadth of their resources as needed. We have 4 AICP planners on the team, because in addition to being transportation guys, both Jeff and Jay are AICP. And we also have a landscape architect who's quite skilled in design. So we'd like to think our kind of key strengths are the master planning, community health and wellness, facilitation, and land use policy. I've written a lot of zoning around the Commonwealth, and while that is not a deliverable here, that that experience and perspective certainly, I think, would add value to the land use considerations.
And I just wanted to add a little bit about the sustainability. The Center for Disease Control has recently broadened its definition of health and wellness, and I've spent some time working with different communities on wellness and what a municipality can do to support the wellness of its residents. And that is a piece of sustainability that's not often referred to, but I think is critical to the sustainability of the community and to its residents. So,
Well, thank you for that. We've got about 10 minutes for questions. I'm going to open it up to the Master Plan Committee first. I see Cheryl's hand raising up. And so go right ahead, Cheryl.
Okay, thank you. I think you addressed a lot of the things that I hoped you would address, but one thing I'd like, if you would, to discuss a little bit is, in Milton we've talked about some of the roadways that we'd like to see some improvements on being state roadways, and we've discussed how can we get the state to participate in our process and to work with us to make some improvements on those roadways. The same thing with public transit, how to get better connection between the bus lines and the T. Maybe how do we get students to have safer access to the schools and to the buses? So if you could talk about that a little bit.
before you say something, Jay, I just wanted to say that we invited the state to participate in Northfield with Jeff because there's a state route that they want to get ownership of, the municipality, and we're just doing that next month. So, sorry. Just
Yeah,
wanted to say that.
I would point out that Milton certainly has many very strong and permanent transportation and transit features. One of the issues is knitting it together. The transportation assets that you have, whether it's sidewalks, roadways, transit system, they function, but not necessarily together as well as they could, and so creating improved connectivity and taking advantage of some of the projects that are recently completed or underway in and around Milton, I think would be one thing to look at. Working closely with some of the agencies you mentioned, Mass DOT. We work with Mass DOT very, very closely on a number of projects. We're very familiar with their project development process, as well as with the MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, and the steps that it takes to bring a transportation project, and eventually getting it from planning and onto the Transportation Improvement Plan, the TIP that is on a rolling 5-year basis. So understanding that process and helping you through it to get your projects prioritized is something that that we would be very comfortable and would look forward to doing. Some of the assets, tremendous assets you have right here in Milton, the Mattapan high-speed line, for example, is right there. We had dinner just before the interview over at the Steel and Rye. We're very impressed with the new restaurant over there, and I like the sound of the trolley going by. One of the questions that came up earlier was, what can the town do to improve its tax base? And I won't speak to the industrial, but certainly from the standpoint of retail and commercial, transit-oriented development is something that's been proven, as I'm sure you all know, to improve property values and while at the same time being very sustainable and with projects such as the Neponset River Greenway Corridor, underway and advancing. Some recent good news on that with some additional design money coming through from the state. These are all, projects that should be leveraged and assets that should and could be leveraged. You've got the high-speed line here. You've got a number of sort of trunk key bus routes, both sort of radial as well as circumferential across town. Knitting that together better with pathways, improved and new sidewalks and things like that to get the transportation access to work better as a system rather than just disconnected parts is something that we do all the time and is very important.
I would just add briefly, this speaks to the interrelationships. I think it's well understood at this point that the current administration has made active efforts to direct its capital spending toward those locations that have promised to create jobs or housing opportunities. So while that will not be applicable in every instance, I'm sure, because not every area is going to be suitable or appropriate for significant growth. There are locations where making that case can be extremely helpful. I've worked on an I-cubed and a couple of DIF initiatives, and I've presented on the newer local infrastructure development program. Those are all mechanisms whereby the incremental revenues from the new development are leveraged to issue debt to support infrastructure improvements. So we all know there's fiscal shortage at every level of government, and to the extent that there's something that is of significant importance to implement that kind of policy, that connection between economic development, housing, and transportation is very important.
Ellen?
I really like your idea of meeting people where they are, and I think one of our community forums should be at Steel and Rye, because that's certainly where people are. I had a question, which is, can you give an example of one of the master plans that you've worked on that was particularly challenging, and briefly what was challenging about it, and how did you meet that challenge?
Well, I would say each master plan is challenging in its own way. What kind of challenge are you interested in?
Well, I would say we have a history of unimplemented plans.
Mm-hmm.
I would say we have a somewhat fragmented town.
Mm-hmm.
And we have some people who don't want any change, and some people want more change.
So that's not unusual at all. I don't know if that's any consolation. We just finished a master plan just last week in the town of Southbridge. And maybe it's because it's fresh on my mind, but it also was particularly fragmented, with a large portion of its population being disenfranchised, never having participated. And there were the old-timers who, for the most part, didn't want a lot of change, and then the newcomers who had come from other places, who had seen other things, who wanted some change. And it's really about getting everybody to come together, and sometimes it's not that they're disagreeing, but if you dig deeper, they're actually disagreeing about priorities. So it's not that when they get together, they can agree that those things are positive, but they're not agreeing about at what priority. So that's when, that's when you got to do the discussion. It's challenging when you do it in multiple languages. It's challenging to bring people together that don't know each other and don't trust each other. So there are a lot of challenges at that level.
I think part of the goal is throughout the process transparency, and while Daphne indicated earlier, the range of online participation would vary. We have put in our proposal that a project website would be a baseline. That would happen regardless, and so that would be one of a range of ways that we would keep people informed about what's going on. And it's certainly our experience that the more that you do that, you can build trust and really build community as well.
And it informs the discussion, so it's not all based on perception.
Right.
David, you had a question?
Maybe you could reveal a little bit about some of your experience that you might have had with institutional players in a relatively small town for the size and the number of institutions that we have between Milton Academy and church properties, Curry College, Labouré is now coming in, and they've got plans of their own. How do they mix with what our master plan may or may not say?
Well, the one that's coming to mind first is Northfield, because we're working there right now, and there's John Herman School, and there's the whole campus that's up for reuse, and that's a big unknown, and it's a town of 3,000. So there was a proposal for a campus of 8,000. So that, can you imagine the impact on the town of 3,000? So basically it's really about understanding what the goals of the institution are and where they align. And then where they don't align, it's really, again, about coming together at the table. Framingham is another place where there was some of that. Medfield, there was a new school coming in near the downtown, and we met with them. It's really, again, what are their goals? How can they align with yours as a town? And if there's a conflict, what can be done to mitigate it or to really mediate it?
I had
No, go ahead and
I had
answer that.
an instance in Westford where the site plan review bylaw explicitly exempted any so-called Section 3 use, Dover Amendment use, your church or educational institution. Yet, when I was hired, turned out there was a 15-year tradition of the planning board calling people before them for site plan review. We had there was a church that was there longer than Town Hall. It had an annex that had been added in 1995, and it had been controversial ever since then. The former chief of police lived right next door, and it had always been a sore spot. Well, when I was there and I was overseeing the building department, they came in just to put a connector, just a hallway between the two buildings. And the building commissioner did not require site plan review. I supported him on that he was correct in his reading of the bylaw, but it really ruffled some feathers because the planning board, that's just how they'd always done things. And I said, with all due respect, my office enforces the bylaw. We don't enforce unwritten rules. But I didn't just say that in a flip way. I said, let's work together. And 6 months later, we had a bylaw that went through town meeting to create a limited site plan review for religious and educational uses. So it was really, I think that the takeaway is, when I see an issue that's a problem or a challenge, you need to address that in a substantive way and not just brush it under the rug or get through it politically. And that, in addition, we actually did a big educational meeting on Dover Amendment, on our LUPA, the federal protections, and we had over 100 people there. And yeah, I think it went a long way to kind of mend fences. And also the church put in some landscaping and things. So it all worked out. But the point is, I really dug into it and made it so it won't happen next time, because now there's no ambiguity in the bylaw.
I have Bernie, I have Cheryl, I have a question, I have Mike. Anybody else? Paul, and then we'll wrap up. Okay, so Bernie, Cheryl.
I'm president of the local access television, and we've been expanding, spending all of the money that we get from Comcast and RCN. How do you utilize in these other towns the local access?
Oh, very much. So
you have call-in.
We do. We make shows out on the street, going into coffee shops, walking on the street, going to places where people go. We make shows in the studio, and you can have call-in shows, or you can have just, informative shows. In Acton, we also made a movie. We had school students make movies and show them, and then there was one in Canton. The students made a movie that was sort of like showing before photographs and then interviewing senior citizens about what was before and what is now. So, for example, there's a mall called Strawberry Mall, and nobody knew it was Strawberry Fields a long time ago, and these kinds of things. So cable is incredibly important to the process.
But getting people to call in real time when you have some event going on.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people are bashful, they don't want to come out.
Right.
It's so easy to pick up the phone.
That's right.
Have you ever done that?
Yes, we've done that, and we've also done it with Facebook right in the meeting. Have people come, yeah.
Cheryl?
Milton, a lot of people think is fully built out. It has a lot of historic properties. And some of those historic properties, when they change ownership, are opportunities for some change.
Right.
So one of the things I think, or actually there's two things about my questions on the historic in town, we have very limited tools for historic preservation.
Mm-hmm.
So whether the master plan can look at how to improve our tools for preserving historic properties and historic landscapes. And then the other is so two unrelated questions in some ways. How do you get people to think about the fact that change will happen on some of these properties that they think in a town is fully built out? How do you get them engaged in a process that says, things will change on some of these?
So for the first part of your question, that's Martha. She spends a lot of time looking at what the historic properties are, what the stories behind them are, and then how to preserve them, and what tools are available. And she's got a lot of expertise in that area. For the second part, very often we'll do a map showing what areas are not preserved. People often think that if they don't want any change to occur, they don't need to do anything, right? Because they just want things to stay the way they are. Well, we do a lot of talking about well, if you don't want anything to change, there's a lot of things you need to do. And these are the areas that are, under threat for change. Some of them you may care less about, some of them you may care more about. So we need to identify what are the priority areas, so you can focus most of your resource there. And it's really about getting people to understand that you want things to stay the same, well, here are the things you need to do for that.
One thing I found very effective in a number of communities is just looking at the new growth for the last several years. And for instance, when I was in Marshfield, it was on the order of $50 million a year. And there was a lot of concern about growth at that time. And I said in a number of meetings, look, we've had $50 million a year of new investment, according to the assessor. That's a lot of private capital coming into the community. We, as a matter of public policy, need to channel that in ways that will make the community better, not, worse or detract from what people felt was strong about Marshfield. So that, there's ways to kind of talk about alternate futures. You can put your head in the sand and the change will happen, or you can engage with it. And that's more difficult, but I think it's certainly more effective. So I've been successful at changing the dynamic in the conversation. So some of the kind of wishing it away, it isn't really material once people kind of come to grips with what's actually been happening.
What the trends are.
Exactly, what's been happening. So
I have Mike, and then Paul, and then myself.
My question is, what I see as the challenge is part of what Cheryl said, and that is how Milton's built up. In the late 90s, I looked at property in Marshfield, and there must have been a half a dozen neighborhoods that were building 15, 20, 30, 20 houses over here. I'd venture to guess in the last 100 years in Milton that's never happened. Now, so my question is, do you have a town that you could display to us that you've worked on that's relative to the situation in Milton, where you've got a small area, a large population, a vast area of unusable land, whether it's Blue Hills or the institutions that we've talked about? It just seems very, and I know, as you commented a minute ago, you don't just, say that we're going to do nothing and it's just going to stay the way it is. I know we have to think it through, and Milton deserves that, but it seems to be a big challenge in just tweaking something that's so built out. I mean, there's only so many ways you can put this table in this room, because the room's confined.
Well, it did seem, at least the web polling that was done for Phase 1, that there was a large percentage, I don't know, it was over 80, that thought adding second-story residential in commercial areas and increasing the commercial activity was a good idea. And there were at least 3 or 4 areas where there seemed to be a lot of support for that happening. So actually, encouraging development in certain areas is an infill development. Acton is one area in one town where we've done a lot of that, and transfer of development rights even.
I have some friends in Acton, and it still strikes me as a community that has large areas of land that are undeveloped, where Milton...
Right.
I'm trying to think of a community that would...
Holden might be another one.
I worked in Marblehead. It was a 40-yard initiative. It was not a master plan initiative, but as part of the scope in Marblehead, our work began, and there were actually 6 different study areas throughout the town that were being considered. Ultimately, 2 districts went forward, one in the downtown and one in an outlying site that had kind of been sitting there vacant for a long time. But what was interesting, very similar, I think, in terms of the built environment, almost you would think built out, not a lot of land area, a lot of environmental constraints and ledge and so forth. But it's amazing how the development community will find those opportunities. And so I think, for someone in Bill's position or the board that's setting policy, it's a matter of when they find those sites, making sure you have something in the regulations that provides an applicant an alternative to doing something that is maybe just tearing something down and putting up something that is out of character. Incentives for renovation or expansion of historic buildings.
Design guidelines included.
Sure.
Zoning related to design guidelines.
I think you hit on something earlier, and that is maybe identifying areas where change can happen.
Right. Exactly.
Yep.
Okay, so Paul.
Just 3 quick questions. How many plans have you worked on? 2, how many are you currently working on? And 3, how large is your support staff? Your support staff?
So, how many plans I worked on?
Approximately.
Approximately I don't know, 25, 26 currently. Currently, one other at the moment. I'm also working at Harvard University, which is a short period of time, and waiting to hear on a couple of others. So right now is a good time to take on a new project.
And support staff?
Support staff, we have interns from Harvard and MIT who will be given very discrete tasks. The rest of the work is done all by us, and we have all of AECOM's resources for whatever we need.
Yeah, just to amplify that point, the office I work in, our two offices in Greater Boston have a combined staff of about 400. In the office I work in, I mean, I can literally walk down the hall and find anybody I need, whether it's in structural engineering, traffic engineering, civil, environmental, water, wastewater, all under one roof. I can just walk down the hall and get anybody, any resource I need to the job. It's there.
All right, and I will waive my question given the time, but thank you all very much. Delighted to have you here, and we will get back to you fairly soon.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I'm going to leave these with you. Oh, well.
If you have something you want to leave, you can give it to Bill and he can distribute it at the end.
That's a good idea. Okay.
And if you want to make the slides available, or I could send them to you as a PDF.
That'd be great.
Right.
Thank you. Yes.
You give that to Bill, too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Quick 7-minute stretch before the second one.
Now you have to pretend we're not here once again, as we dismantle. We'll be fast.
One to nothing. There's one. Not the other one. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess.
So our next group is the VHB team. This is the proposal for those of you who have proposals. And I think Bill is...
VHB, did you say?
VHB, yep, that's the one, you got it.
Next group is VHB. If you can go around and introduce yourselves, they'll introduce themselves.
And you'll get your presentation out.
I'll get it set up.
Sounds good. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have, I think we've got enough chairs for all of you. We'll run through and introduce ourselves. My name is Emily Ennis. I am a member of the Planning Board, and I'm also the Planning Board's liaison to the Master Plan Committee.
Alex Whiteside, I'm a member of the Planning Board.
Bernie Lynch, member of the Planning Board.
Wallace Sisson, I'm a member of the Historic Commission.
Cheryl Tagayas, I'm a member of the Master Plan Committee and the Warrant Committee.
Michael Blute, I'm a member of the Conservation Committee.
Dick Burke, Master Plan Committee.
Paul Travis, Master Plan Committee.
Tom Hurley, Board of Selectmen, and liaison board to the Master Plan Committee.
Tabor Keely, Master Plan Committee.
Mike Kelly, excuse me, Planning Board member.
Ed Duffy, Planning Board.
Stephen Affinato, Board of Park Commissioners.
Great. Good group.
We'll introduce ourselves.
Sounds like a plan.
Thank you. My name's Ken Schwartz. I'm a Principal and Director of Planning at VHB.
Angela Vincent, Sustainability Project Manager at VHB.
I'm Jeffrey Morrison-Logan. I'm one of our senior urban designers at VHB. Good evening, everyone.
And I'm Craig Seymour. I'm President and Managing Principal of RKG Associates.
Well, welcome. We're looking forward to your presentation. We have about 45 minutes, so we're thinking roughly 20-25 minutes for your presentation, and about 20 minutes or so for questions and answers.
Great. Well, thank you, and we're excited to be here and hope our charge over the next 45 minutes is to demonstrate to you that we're the team to work with you all in preparing your comprehensive plan. So we have a roughly a 20-minute presentation that we will run through collectively, all four of us, and we're glad that we could do it in this format around the table because that's how we work, interactive with all of you. So do you want to turn the presentation? Okay, so what we put together tonight is this is our agenda, kind of a brief overview of our team and our experience, how we will approach the work. Public outreach we know is an extremely important component of the project. The implementation, which is something that we're going to spend a bit of time talking about because we do think that that is perhaps the most important aspect of the plan itself, and then we'll conclude with some of our distinguishing characteristics about our team. So first off, about VHB. VHB is we have about 900 staff, so we can be considered a large firm. We have 22 offices up and down the East Coast. We pride ourselves on integrated services. So under one roof, we provide the planning, the transportation, the land development, and the environmental services. So all of those services are within the company, and we have that capability of being able to tap those resources at any time. But what you're going to get on this project is a very small team of dedicated planning professionals that have done master planning and comp planning work specifically here in New England, and then drawing upon those resources that we have throughout the company to supplement the team and answer technical specific questions as they come up. We commit ourselves to developing and executing a specific action-oriented plan. We don't want to see a plan that's going to sit on the shelf. I brought copies and I can pass them around and sort of in counterclockwise or clockwise order here of comp plans that we have prepared that have been specifically implemented, and we can get into that in a moment about how we do that. We're going to work very closely with you all, with the planning board and with the master plan committee, and we're also committing ourselves to engaging very closely working with the community throughout the process. We're also joined by RKG Associates, Craig Seymour, who's to my right. We have a strategic partnership with RKG on comp planning work like this. They bring a very specific focus to comp plans, and that's around the economic, real estate advisory, and a real fiscal economic analysis, which we think is, again, an extremely important component of this project. If we go to the next slide, this is a showing of our comprehensive plans that we have done over the last 10 years. The map of Massachusetts is just showing our municipal projects that we've done, and you can see that we pretty much have touched just about every municipality in Massachusetts. But on the left are two sortings. The top sort from Adams down to Williamstown are comp plans that VHB and RKG have done together over the last 10 years. And then the bottom from Charlton down to Watertown are comp plans that VHB has done. So we do about 2 or 3 comp plans a year. You will also notice a number of those plans are award-winning plans. Our work in Bedford, New Hampshire, Southborough, Massachusetts, and Charlton, Massachusetts were all recognized by the American Planning Association for their focus specifically on implementation. So we're very comfortable. This is the kind of work that we do. We're passionate about community comprehensive master plans, and we have that demonstrated experience to do it. As I said, award-winning plans, these are a sampling of those that have won awards. We're privileged enough to have won awards with the American Planning Association. We were recently won an award from the Vision Long Island for some of the work that we've done in Suffolk County on the eastern end of Long Island. And we would like to think that should we be fortunate enough to work in Milton, that one of our goals collectively is to produce an award-winning project with all of you at the table. So that's something that we're committed to doing. In your RFP, you were very clear about the evaluation criteria. in terms of the experience and in planning, using state-of-the-art techniques in public outreach, producing high-quality reports and graphics, being available and accessible. We would like to add one other evaluation criteria, which is implementation. We see that as an extremely important one, and we've organized our presentation around these evaluation criteria. So this is kind of a graphic. I don't expect you to sort of get into the details of it, but this is our kind of integrated approach that we take towards doing comprehensive plans. And I think the most important aspect of that is around the outer circle are all the master plan elements, whether they be economic development or housing or transportation. But then as you get in the inner circles of that, there are all these elements that cross-connect and that are interrelated with one another. They include things like public participation, the data gathering, the implementation, and we take very much a systematic approach to doing the comprehensive plan. It's collaborative, it's integrated, and it focuses around producing a plan that can be implemented and acted upon when it's produced. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Angela Vincent, who's our project manager. I just want to say that Angie is, she's been at VHB for a few years now and brings an unbelievable passion and energy to the work that she does. She's extremely well organized to the point where she told us what time to leave today to come to the interview with the best directions in terms of how to get here, anticipating that the Patriot game was taking place and we needed to be here on time. But I think she brings that energy and passion to the work that she does, and I think she's the right project manager for this project.
Thank you, Ken, and thank you all for having us here. We're excited. I do want to take this approach to showing you how I would approach this project, because that's what you want. You want to know how this is going to be implemented in the long run. I am inclusive. I'm working with the Greenfield Master Plan Committee, talking with them weekly about how they're going to pull this plan together. We're about 2/3 away through the plan development itself. And literally talking either daily and or weekly with the town planner, with the different folks on their master plan committee. They have 36 people on their master plan committee. So working with those diverse folks, thinking about how to approach them in individual ways that's actually going to mean something to them. Understanding their limitations. A lot of these are volunteers, some of them are town staff. It's important for me as the project manager to understand what some of those, both the opportunities and the limitations of the town and the staff and the volunteers are in this process. I'm also using sustainability as the framework, as basically the foundation for this plan and for actually all my work. I was brought to VHB to work on our Climate Smart Communities programs, but a lot of my experience now is being brought into master plans, and I'm very privileged to be working on one of the first sustainable master plans in the state. So Greenfield really is taking an innovative approach and looking at how they can be more sustainable, and I'm happy to see that you're actually looking down that path as well. And I'll show a little bit about those principles in the long run here after a couple of slides, but really then this all culminates into that I love the public, and I know that sounds really tweaky and a little wonky, but it does come down to that. I don't know if there's been a job, and I'm trying to think of it back into my travel agency days where I haven't worked with the public. It's pretty much in every single job I've done in the past 20 years. So, and I know I don't look that old, but I am. As an indication of how organized I am, I did put this schedule together. I know this was a requirement, but this is actually how I actually implement any project, or actually jumpstart any project. Thinking about the different buckets of what that would require, how everyone's going to be involved, what the timeline is for it, and obviously how participation is really integral into this. As you can see, most of the months include either a meeting with yourselves, with the Master Plan Committee, or with the Planning Board. But interwoven throughout that is the public participation process. So whether it be workshops, Facebook page, Mind Mixer, the Master Plan website, there's going to be constant public interaction and opportunities to engage with your citizens here in Milton. So when I start every project, I want to do that baseline and think about where are we coming from, who is Milton, who is the community, what are they made of, But keeping in mind that there are lots of trends and emerging issues that we should be thinking about that we need to apply to many of these communities. Not all of these are going to apply, but most of them do, and we're thinking about this as a planning profession because we need to be forward-thinking. That's what these plans are. They're forward-thinking. They're comprehensive plans for 10 years, or longer in some cases. But looking at your infrastructure, a lot of bridges and our roads are really in bad repair. Climate change and how that's going to affect a lot of our infrastructure and our people as well. Thinking about health issues, as you've heard before, but public health isn't just around, the obesity, but it's also around our children and asthma, air quality issues, and then building codes. As we know in the state, the stretch code has been a real popular issue, but not just the building itself, but also the materials. These are really popular issues that are coming about, but we also want to take into consideration who is Milton, so your population and how are you comprised, males versus females, and your demographics, the average age of the citizens. This is really going to help us in the long run to look at a bigger picture of who Milton is, so that we can start to both put that outreach plan together, also work with you on the outreach, but then really come into how the actual elements of the plan are going to be developed as well. So everything from transportation to your open space to the specific growth centers that you've identified in phase 1. So really taking a good look at that. And we always look at what you've done in the past. We never think in individual pieces. We think that these are always going to be built upon. You have a foundation already. You did a master plan back in 1974. So taking a look at that and building off of it, yes, it is a little old and 39 years, but there might be still pieces in there. And just taking a look at how you've grown too, looking at that as a baseline and starting from there and seeing what progress you have made. But these other plans are things that we can take components of to make sure we're building off of them, especially phase 1 and your housing production plan. And we've seen that that's still in development, so we'll stay tuned on that part as we begin this process. But here's where we do bring in some issues and opportunities, and this is again building off of your phase 1. We're looking at 4 different issues in this presentation, but we know that there are many more that need to be addressed as part of what you did with your goals and visioning. But looking at transportation and how Milton Village and the issues along Randolph Avenue corridor, which some of us took in and realized that there are issues for transportation, Blue Hill Avenue, and how you need to connect all these transportation systems. We need to address parking. What do your gateways look like, and how can you be proud when someone does drive, walk, bike into Milton? And how do you proactively plan considering future development, whether it's planned right now or you want to anticipate it in the future?
So I'd like to talk just a little bit about the transportation aspects. I think part of what we all love on our team in doing these master plans is that it's really about combining all of these systems together, from the land use, the transportation, thinking about the character of your community, the natural resources. So the fact that you have these really interesting north-south corridors that link the community together, the full network of streets, we see that as a great opportunity to build upon what's already in the vision plan, the phase 1 part of your visioning process. What we're doing typically in the corridor studies, as an example out in Route 20 in Marlboro, is we think from the inside out and from the outside in on these types of projects. So it's not just about the roadway itself, it's about how you integrate the neighborhoods, the land uses, the development patterns. And we've identified 2 or 3 different priorities here. What we want to do is really get into some of the nuts and bolts about how those corridors are yes, the graphic that we saw this evening, but how might the growth pattern change over time a little bit more? We have a wealth of experience in looking at multiple corridors throughout the coast, really understanding how those corridors could really be a part of that integrated system. So a lot of great opportunities there for you, I think.
So our second issue, we dug a little deeper into transportation because it was called out in your visioning in phase 1, but a lot of opportunities around complete streets, specifically looking at, again, Blue Hills Parkway, Canton Avenue, Brook Road, Granite Ave, and how those pieces make a complete street. How can it be safe? How can it be for all modes of transportation? And incorporating the low-impact development and obviously stormwater runoff as well, but the connectivity and making it a place and welcoming, a welcoming place for people and bikes and pedestrians to be transported.
So I think here's another example of where we've started to think about what does it mean to have the complete street kit of parks. So at VHB, we have landscape architects, myself as an urban designer, understanding not just about from the policy perspective about including all those different modes in the street, but what does it mean to design them and lay them out, and where things you've identified, probably half a dozen different places where you want to extend those, how can they really contribute to all those different modes, but also going beyond the street. We like to call them complete neighborhoods, complete districts, complete parts of your town. We want to work again further than just those streets to understand where you can be applying those strategies. But I think it gets into understanding the details and how much right of way you have. Can you fit all those modes or not? So being kind of realistic back, I think, is very important to understanding where and how you can achieve those outcomes.
And the third issue here is around land use and really identifying the specific nodes. Again, there were many that were identified in phase 1, but some of the ones here that were called to mind was the Blue Hills Preserve and some of the zoning inconsistencies that you identified through that phase. So thinking about those priority areas as we're moving forward, how do you preserve and improve your open spaces and connect them? How do they connect to your neighborhoods and the design for those? And again, addressing your zoning inconsistencies. And I'm specifically working, as I mentioned, in Greenfield, and I looked at their land use, and you can see they have a lot of land uses in Greenfield, and we actually pulled these out separately, including single-family, multifamily, et cetera. But they're really interested in starting to connect these pieces and thinking about open space and agricultural protection. So really being more strategic with them about what the scenario is here and how we push that forward into the future and encourage them to connect a lot of those pieces. So our last piece here, our last issue and opportunity was around economic development. So looking at Milton Village, the redevelopment opportunities on the Tedeschi site, and then a couple of sites off of the Blue Hills Parkway and Avenue. And specifically, you identified the mixed uses in those districts, how this development can actually be community-driven, not something that's actually business-driven. Really focusing on redevelopment, not new development. And then these specific districts had been called to mind in your vision statement.
I was very interested in looking at some of the surveys that were done in phase 1 and how economic development came up several times as a very high-ranking criteria for what the master plan needs to address. And as in any community, I had to agree with that. Milton is constrained. You don't have acres and acres of greenfield sites on which new tax base can be developed, new industrial uses, new job-generating uses. And so we have to think creatively in terms of what kind of redevelopment can take place and how does that redevelopment take place within the context of the nature of the community, the look and feel of the community, the historic aspects of the community. It's difficult, but it can be done. Also looking at you from a locational aspect within the greater Boston metro market, you don't have the kind of drop-off access. You're not known as a retail center as other communities are, so it has to be community-driven. And the question is, what are the limits to that, and how far can you push those kinds of economic development issues? Our experience in this is very widespread. Some examples here. We're working right now, and have worked for the last 9 years, with the city of Quincy on the Quincy Center development. We do all of the financial analysis, all of the market analysis. We're the peer reviewer for all the IT work that we do, and we know that community very well. But we've worked all through the Commonwealth. More importantly, we've worked for the past 27 years throughout New England, and for that matter, around the country. So we bring a perspective of seeing best practices, what's happened in other communities, whether they're communities in Virginia or in Florida or here in New England, and what works when it comes to looking at economic development. And just one last thing, economic development, underlying economic development, we can talk about it all night long, but underlying, when we strip everything else away, there's a real estate deal that takes place. And you have to make sure that the master plan and the regulations you have in the community support the right kind of real estate deal if you expect investors to come in and make those investments of their own money for. Oftentimes that's forgotten in public planning, but it's the private sector that puts their money into the ground, and that's what creates jobs, that's what creates new development, that creates new housing units, all of that, and that's a very fundamental aspect of economic development that you need to, and we will certainly interweave into the master plan process.
Great. Thank you. So I promised to get back to sustainability. These are the principles that we are applying to comprehensive planning and development of long-term sustainable comprehensive plans. These are not to be developed into one chapter. They are woven throughout an entire plan because they really are who the community is. The strategies that are in every element deal with how the built environment can be more livable, how you can incorporate equity into all of your transportation planning and your land use planning, economic development planning, how, as Craig just said, you're part of a region, how can you actually take responsibility for that? And we're happy to see an MAPC representative on here. It really goes to show that you do recognize you are part of a greater thing, a greater entity. How do you encourage authentic participation? So as you can see, these principles aren't just about what goes into a document, it's also about the creation of that. And it culminates, as we've been mentioning this entire time, into accountable implementation. How can you make sure that plan is going to have the A to Z? It's going to identify the key stakeholders who are part of this. What is going to define success for you, and how long-term can you make that success happen through collaboration and making sure you're going back to it and assessing your success. So going back to public outreach, as we mentioned before, this is a very important piece, and I'm going to turn this over to Jeffrey.
This is what we love doing. Angie had that slide up front. She loves the public. We love engaging the public in the process that we do. In the end of the day, this plan is about your community, and we're going to work so hard with you to figure out ways of engaging everybody, building upon lessons learned from the first phase, being creative. I think the point that you should take away from our team is that we've done this in many different ways, up and down the East Coast. All of us love doing it. We have formal training in doing the facilitation stuff here. We'll use high technology, low technology. And here, in our workshops, we try to find every opportunity to get something a little bit more creative out of the process. So while we do workshops and kind of these group meetings, we actually now get to the point where we want to have programmed activities during those workshops, having certain topic areas and discussions going on. So it's not just to get people in the room to talk about things, it's about what problems are we going to solve? Do we have the right people at the table? How are we using things like Legos and about maps to make it more interactive? Because quite frankly, in today's planning processes, the public expects a lot, and we want to give them a lot as well. So that's going to make your plan better. This is just one of the steps we're doing that.
And another step, you've probably seen Turning Point, and I believe, yes, I do have one on me. It's not a remote, at least for this, I do not have an exercise for you planned out, but we do use this for real-time participation. It allows us to take the information back and start to use that information to be able to make decisions. So we're pulling together not just the responses, but we're having real-time discussions around them. A lot of folks like this because there is some anonymity to it, but it does allow a larger group to be able to participate in a process.
I may just add that we initially, VHB invested in this probably about 4 or 5 years ago and purchased the software and the clickers, and we now have, they've become so popular that we now have had to go, in 2 different times, had to go out and purchase more clickers. So now we have, I think, all total 500 of these, and we've been using them very successfully as part of public outreach.
These are for people that are in the audience. How can you capture the people that are coming?
We will get to that in a moment.
Local cable TV.
You can actually set them up, believe it or not, if you do webinars or other sorts of things. They wouldn't get a clicker, but they do have, you can set up, you can set up Turning Point so that your computer will actually answer it as well. We don't do those as often, but.
So if I could share an example with you here about some of the breakout groups. Just a few months ago, Angie and I were working in the Greenfield community and talking about how do we brand these little sub-events that are happening there. What we did in that case is we said, well, let's call them these little cafe conversations. So let's have people come into the town. We gave them icebreaker questions. They had to ask each other questions about their community, take some notes about who they were interviewing themselves, report back to a larger group, report back to us as facilitators, with the idea that we need to be giving them the tools to get engaged, so whether it's the online stuff or the interactive things that are one-on-one. We really see that you have an opportunity to build on the phase 1 stuff, but really, in a way, brand it a little bit more and try to get more into those details, especially now that you're thinking about implementation step. With the vision in place, well, how do you really get everyone gravitated around what are the right steps to get there? We think more of those conversations and giving them tools to get that conversation going is pretty important.
And to get to your point, there are lots of opportunities for virtual engagement as well, and we've been using quite a few of them, Facebook pages, Twitter accounts. the word art, which is can actually be done in person, but then basically stands as kind of an electronic stamp, if you will, of the event itself, which reminds people, and people like to use them too as kind of maybe even if they're icons, or it can become the brand for the project, because it really does remind you, or what were the important themes from that event. And so we've done word art quite a bit. CrowdWrite and MindMixer have both been used very successfully in quite a few of our projects, mostly MindMixer, who is actually part of our team. So we have secured them as part of this project. We've been using this successfully on 3 projects right now. In fact, the Watertown project is one of the highest or the top performing MindMixer site in the United States, which we're excited to say. And actually, it's really fun to go, and you can see some of the ideas that they've actually come up with. The great thing about MindMixer, as a relatively inexpensive tool for us to be able to engage the people electronically, virtually, it's a conversation between them. So it's not just, even though we can actually respond as the folks who are actually managing it, it's a conversation between the community. So an idea is pitched out there and people can like it, kind of like you do on Facebook. You can comment on it, you can rate it, or you can post pictures. There are lots of different ways for people to interact with each other. And as a manager, we can also use this as a way to say, well, are we capturing the folks that we really want to right now? Yes, you do have to have a computer in order to do this, but we do have a lot of folks in the United States who have computers now, luckily. So they have also actually launched an app. Actually just a couple of weeks ago. So this is great for the kids. It's great for the folks who have smartphones that want to engage outside of their home, not in front of their computer. But this is the interface that we see when we actually make decisions and we're working with the community. We see that the average age is 44 years old, and it's a female, and they're female. And they can also share it in a variety of ways, because we're not just communicating by email anymore. We're using Google+. We're obviously using Twitter and Facebook. You can also do this through LinkedIn. And I believe they're actually going to start using Instagram as well. So MindMixer is constantly innovating and constantly progressing in the way that they're engaging people, and they're constantly asking us for feedback, so we can actually use the experiences we've had to make it better, which is really awesome. We're really excited to be continuing to work with them.
So at VHB, we have a person that his sole responsibility is creating websites for a lot of the different projects that we have. We've updated templates over the years. This is some of our more current templates with photos and a lot of information, a lot of great colors and so forth. I think what we find most important about this is that this is the platform to link a lot of these social media things together. From the MindMixer, you can see on the one on the bottom right there, the Facebook sites. It's kind of the go-to place to learn about things, because I've also found that people don't really quite know maybe how to use Facebook to engage in the public setting, or MindMixer is still somewhat new to people, even though we're having such a successful experience with that. So this becomes almost like the launching pad and the go-to, and all the FAQ stuff that could be here to really help the public navigate that. So we have in our scope to do a whole website here, and what we'll do is we'll sit down between the multiple dozens of ones that we've done, pick out the styles that you like and so forth, develop the content with you to really make it most effective.
Obviously incorporating the existing site to make sure we're not reinventing the wheel. But
absolutely. So a little bit on our reports too. We pride ourselves as well on being able to package complicated reports, simple to read graphics. Hopefully you've all had a chance to look through some of the reports that we put here together as well. I think we found that just making it very visually rich, data rich, and kind of simple to understand is some of the common themes between how we've been doing this. We very much foresee doing that with you as well. I think the Greenfield one is going to be the next evolution in our chapter of developing that, where it's going to be really about capturing the themes and about the visual aspects of the community, because there's just so much diversity out there. So visualization is a very important part of it as well.
Absolutely.
And on the graphic side too, I mentioned before that through a lot of the other parts of VHB that we will really tap into during the process, that integrated services that Ken mentioned, from the landscape architects, the transportation engineers, foresee for the right areas and for the right problems to be solved, showing people some before and afters about corridors, land uses, because again, we've learned that it's easy to talk about it, but when you can show somebody what this stuff can look like, it makes it so much easier along the way.
Absolutely.
Okay, and then just to sort of wrap up, a few more slides. On implementation, I mentioned earlier.
Disappeared. The slide before that.
We really do see this as being actually not something, oftentimes the implementation chapter is the last one you write. We think that the implementation is something that you start very early on in the process. And, there are a couple of takeaways of all these presentations and consultants that you're interviewing. And I think that one of the things that we really want to, if there's just a few things that you remember us by at the end of the day, I think on the implementation side is something that VHB really focuses on. We have the in-house capabilities that we have with the staff that have worked with the DOT, they've worked with private developers, they have worked with municipalities in terms of helping them get grant funding. It's an area of the practice and an area of the work that we do that we really excel at. And it's something that at the end of the day, the plan, the next step in the plan is to implement the plan and not coming up with things that sound great, they look great, they are pretty pictures, but 20 years from now, you want to be able to point to those things in the plan that have been implemented. And I would just point to one of the more successful communities that we've worked in the town of Amesbury on the North Shore. We did the comprehensive plan, and one of the requirements, if you go to the next slide, was there was a requirement to go back to town meeting each year and report on the progress in terms of implementing the comp plan. And that is something that has lived on since we completed the plan 6 or 7 years ago. And each year, aspects of the plan are implemented, whether they be transportation improvements, whether they be economic development initiatives, whether they be affordable housing initiatives, and they're in the plan and they're followed. And I think that that's something that, the last thing we want to do is produce a plan that's going to just end up on a shelf. And the plans that we produce, we can give you concrete examples of those aspects of plans that have been implemented, and that's something that I think we really do pride ourselves on. So if you go to the wrap-up slide, just in terms of kind of the things that you're going to get from us, that I think, the kind of national expertise with the local experience, I think is very important. The integrated services approach, I think the other aspect, the creative public outreach, we are constantly bettering ourselves at public outreach. Jeffrey and I in particular have gone through the charrette facilitation training program. We are trained facilitators in the public. We are constantly coming up with new and innovative ways, whether they be use of mind mixer, whether it be this that we're using quite a bit. We're working with children in school groups in the city of New Bedford, where we did their comp plan. We worked with the schools to get the children involved in helping to define what they would like to see the future of their community be. And what better way to get parents involved than to get the children involved first, because then inevitably the parents will be involved as well. So we're doing a lot of different innovative, creative things on outreach. And then the other aspect is the capacity and the deep bench that we bring. We have, this is your core team here, but we have a staff of 14, our planning group is 14 staff people, full-time staff people that work at VHB, coupled with all the transportation and civil engineering and environmental specialists that we can draw upon. So the deep bench, that integrated services, and also the focus on realism is another aspect that we would like you to remember us by. So that's kind of wrapped up our portion of the presentation. I'm sure you have questions, and we look forward to answering them.
For questions, so I'm going to open it up to the group.
Is $100,000 a lot of money or a little money for a town our size?
It's about, we've done comp plans for less, and we've done comp plans for more. I think it's about in the middle. I think it's, we're doing a comp plan, finishing up a comp plan right now in the town of Watertown. That's $100,000. So it's, I think it's right in the mid-range. For a community of your size, it's about right.
Remember too, this is phase 2. You've done phase
right.
1, which has a lot of the visioning component of that, which is time consuming and costly as well, has been done and done well.
Yes.
I have a question. I was looking at one of your previous, I didn't realize how long ago it was, the town of Longmeadow, a town I'm familiar with, and it's remarkably similar to Milton in terms of it's a fairly mature city adjacent to a major urban center. What were the particular challenges in that charge, and what were your strategies of dealing with it? going through a lot of the same things. I know that I'm very interested in Greenfield, but I think that really I'm much more interested in what we would consider to be peer communities that you're doing.
Well, it's interesting, we were talking beforehand about comparable towns to Milton. And first of all, no town is the same.
Right.
That's one thing we've learned, and there's no cookie cutter approach that we take. I think Watertown is somewhat similar in terms of its proximity to Boston, good access, you know, mature, built out, you know, river, Charles River and the Ponset River, you know, similarities. But there are also significant differences. I mean, Long Meadow, now that you mention it, actually, there are some similarities. And that was one that actually RKG and VHB worked on together. There was a lot of strong focus on economic development. You know, sort of focusing on their kind of commercial centers and trying to attract more retail and commercial development.
They had a bit more green space to work with there.
Yes.
They also had the residential mix, which is similar, a very high-end residential mix for the most part. And so that housing component became a very important
Which is why I referenced it, but I'm really interested in what were the challenges that you ran into that, you know, in terms of putting together a group. Milton has been very good over the years. We're very good at stopping things. We're not quite as good at getting things going forward. So in terms of knowing a little bit about Long Meadow and how their composition is, I imagine you were running into some of the same types of things.
Yeah, we were. I mean, there were, Long Meadow had some challenging transportation issues as well that we actually continue to do work. I mean, that's the other aspect of VHB's work is that we like, you know, after our plans are finished, there's going to be transportation infrastructure work that follows, and we have longstanding relationships with many of those colored-in towns. We have long-standing working relationships with those communities. In Long Meadow, we continue to do work, transportation work in the town of Long Meadow, coming out of the plan that we had identified, some bike trail work, and then also some streetscape, traffic calming work in their commercial centers as well. So,
and also, just to build on that, this was a 2004 plan. At the time, the real estate market was just putting on the front burner with high boil. And as a result of that, you had housing equity issues, you had development deals that were coming along fast and furious, and a master plan that had to react flexibly to what you didn't know was coming down the road. I think we have the luxury now of being able to look forward into a marketplace which is fairly predictable, much more predictable than it was in 2004. And in that case, you had to have a plan that was able to accommodate changes in direction of where land uses were going and where the different types of, whether it's 40B projects or those kinds of things that were coming into play very quickly and having to react to that.
the other aspect, now that it was so long ago that it's all coming back to me now, is Bay Path College, institutional representation, and a very important sort of partnership that Bay Path played with the planning committee in terms of working on the comp plan together with the institutions. And I know that here in Milton you have very strong institutional representation as well, and the role that those institutions should play in the comp plan is something also to consider.
Sure. On the economic development analysis, I think in the visioning there are a number of people who voice support for local retail, or, neighborhood retail, not wanting, sort of more chain retail and so forth. So, do you sort of test out sort of the ideals of the community, like to say that, yeah, there is a market for that, or there's really not a market for that, or if you're going to have that kind of retail, you need this kind of parking, or you need this kind of roadway access? I mean, do you do some sort of testing out of whether the goals of the community are actually achievable in the private marketplace?
We do. Actually, I have one of my colleagues who is a retail specialist and has been working in the field for 30 years and understands what drives retail. At issue here in Milton is you have a lot of disposable income, yet the people who also want and support and say they want to support neighborhood retail don't spend enough money there. They still spend the bulk of their disposable income, somewhere else, usually in the big box stores or something like that. So what happens is you need to be able to come up with a unique product that attracts them. And typically, it's in denser environments where you can bring not only just a retail store, but a series of stores, a series of services, preferably with people living there who are going to use this on a regular basis. But they also have to be able to tap into the rest of the market, which means they have to get there and they have to park their car. So the parking issue, the transportation issues interweave with that. There's no right answer to that. Localized community retail works very well in some places, and other places where you think it would work, it doesn't. And it also has to do with this, the structure of the real estate ownership and the market, and the availability of space and the availability to develop. What's at issue today is a developer, even in a mixed use, doesn't make any money off the retail. It rents for, rents that basically might pay the cost. In Amesbury, where, again, implementation coming along, we're doing a feasibility study for a mixed-use retail building in the lower mill yard. And the answer is the retail is going to lose money. The only way you're going to make money is to put enough residential above it so the developer is interested in it. And so they're wrestling now. We talked about a 2-story with office above it. That's not going to work. It's going to have to be at least 3 stories above it with sufficient number of apartment units in this case, or maybe condominiums, to support the retail that the community really wants to be there. And then there's a fight of finding the right retailer to be there.
Let me just add one thing real quick. I like working with Craig a lot in RKG over the years. We not only do comprehensive plans with them, but also master plans and really development plans. And we really try to find ways about not losing the vision, marrying the vision with the realities of the market in there. And it takes a lot of back and forth and understanding what a site will let you do or a downtown setting will do and what the market will do, and trying to find ways of bouncing that back and forth. I think that's probably one of the bigger challenges about seizing that economic potential and applying it to what you've got, because you might not marry. Right?
Working with Quincy, who's our neighbor, and we have a major thoroughfare going through Quincy and back and forth. A lot of problems with side streets, cutting through. We are working with Quincy now in the downtown development area. You get an asset to us?
I think it is.
To us?
I think New Quincy Center, when it's successful, and that was a loaded answer there, is going to become a major regional ring city in its own right. And as a result, that's going to have the attractions that are going to make Milton that much more attractive for what it is. For a place to live, a place to perhaps work and live, a place where you can do your local shopping, but when you want to go have a great steak at a fancy downtown restaurant or whatever it is that these new cities are going to offer, you might go over Quincy. But that's working in your favor. It's going to bring more people into the area, so I think that overall it's going to be very positive for you. It's going to bring more traffic and more people, but that's part of this overall master planning process. That's going to happen regardless. You can't shut your streets down. There's going to be more and more cut-through traffic, just as population and employment grows within the entire region. So how do you deal with that now? How do you strengthen what you have, and by leveraging the resources that you have?
How do we make the streets so that it'd be a deterrent to be cut-throughs? I mean, I think what I heard in some of the meetings that I went to is people love the idea that here we are in Milton, and it's surrounded by very urban areas, and it has a very rural character. Now, if Quincy develops into a city on its own and generates more people, we're going to be encompassed by these urban areas. And I think the only thing that makes Milton is the fact that it isn't an urban area. It's almost a rural area that's a shot to Boston, a shot to South Shore, anywhere you want to go. I mean, it always strikes me that the more development that happens in Milton is going to steal more of the character that is in itself the appeal of Milton. We become more like Quincy, or more like Randolph, or more like Mattapan, or more like Dorchester. Milton is no longer going to have the appeal that it presently has.
And that's what the master plan process is all about, is one, defining what that character is.
Defining that vision and character, and then coming up with actions and recommendations that enable that to happen, preserve that.
The ideal thing is that you want that kind of activity and that density, but you don't want anybody else to know about it, so that they don't, you slow down Randolph Street, for example, so that the people who are cutting through now think it's going to take them longer. But because you guys know it doesn't take you any longer. It just feels like you're going a little slower because of traffic calming and those kinds of things. Then it becomes the ideal situation. You have slower traffic, you have perhaps more traffic, which means that the stores and everybody else may improve. and you have more recognition that way as a place to live and a place to perhaps come and shop occasionally, or have a little office, a little professional office or something.
And unfortunately, we have to end there because our time is up. But thank you all very much for coming. We appreciate it.
We did bring
Soon.
just one last executive summary handout for you all, just to remember us by.
Thank you for having us.
We wish we could
Yes,
continue
thank
the
you.
conversation
I
for a
know.
lot longer, but
We
thank
hope
you very
to.
much, and we hope to. Yes.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Joe.
Good night, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Time did they start?
Well, do you want me to run that long?
Eddie.
Already?
0-0 Patriots.
Get in the way.
No, it started at 8.
It started at 8:25.
Wally said 8.
I thought it started at 8.
So are you checking on the score?
What, how far into the game is
So,
it?
update?
Oh,
Alright, so, we get a,
0-0.
so the last group is coming up. It's the Brown Walker team.
This lady looks familiar. Haven't we seen her before?
Alex is right.
What?
Alex is right.
Yeah, 8:25. Either that or the globe is, you know, I checked it out with
There's
care.
still 14 minutes to go in the first quarter.
So after 1 minute, it's tied.
All right, everyone. Well, we're going to run around and introduce ourselves and then have you introduce yourselves, and then we'll have about 45 minutes for presentation and questions and answers. So roughly 25-minute presentation, 20-minute Q&A. I'm Emma Milton. I'm a member of the Planning Board and also the liaison from the Planning Board to the Master Plan Committee.
And I'm Alex Whiteside, and I'm a member of the Planning Board.
Bernie Lynch, a member of the Planning Board.
I'm Wallace Sisson. I'm a member of the Historic Commission and the Master Planning Committee.
Cheryl Tagayas, I'm a member of the Master Plan Committee and the Warrant Committee.
Michael Booth, I'm on the Conservation Commission.
Dick Burke on the planning committee will give you points for brevity, so it's,
We're 8:15, so.
Welcome back, Paul Travis, Master Plan Committee.
Continue with us.
Yeah. Carrie Pike with Howard Stein Hudson Associates. Sue Brown with Brown Walker Planner.
Ted Brovich with Howard Stein Hudson Associates.
Brian Groth with Brown Walker Planners.
Tom Gurley, Board of Selectmen, and liaison of the Selectmen. We'll start planning director.
Ted Keeley,
Mike Kelly, member of the planning board.
yeah, definitely the planning board.
Board of Park Commission.
We're looking forward to your presentation.
Great, thank you so much for inviting us in. Right, is it the red button? No, don't touch the red button. Is it
The red button's fine.
Right.
Written down on Alex's foot.
Oh, okay. So, thank you so much. We are, we've been lucky to have worked with a lot of you for the visioning portion of this. And tonight we're excited to talk to you about our partnership with Howard Stein Hudson for the second phase if we get chosen, and also to talk to you about our approach. You have our proposal and know the nuts and bolts, but we really want to focus on those items tonight. So a quick overview. You're going to hear from all of us tonight, so we're going to switch back and forth, try to keep you awake, introducing our team, talking about your needs and how we think the approach that we've outlined will help you meet your needs and move us forward in this process. So I wasn't going to introduce Brian and I at all because I thought that everyone knew us, but for those who do not, I'm a landscape architect. I'm the principal of Brown Walker Planner. I'm just going to keep it very brief. This is Brian Groth. He's also a community planner, a background in urban design, great with graphics, etc. And I'm going to introduce Carrie Puckett again so she can tell you a little bit about the other members of the Howard Stein Hudson team that are not here and anything about her firm.
Right, so some of you might know me from the work in East Milton Square. I see a couple familiar faces around. So we've worked with the town on that, and I've been the lead on that. And I call myself a plan engineer, which means I'm an engineer by training, but I do a lot of work that starts in planning and then ends up going through final design and into construction. So I see the big picture and can take it down to the details. And Ted Brovitz is our manager of community planning and design, and he's very good with thinking about how land use intersects with the public realm and what your private development decisions might mean for the public realm and how you can translate that into zoning and all of those different kinds of things. We don't have with us tonight Rick Latini, who is our manager of site civil engineering. He is very good at thinking about stormwater management, utilities, sustainability, so he would be handling all of those issues for our team along with Brown Walker. Mike Tremblay is a pedestrian and bicycle specialist, a transportation engineer with us, and he's been doing a lot of work with Ted recently and works with myself as well. And he's really in the complete street stuff. He bikes everywhere, doesn't own a car, all that kind of stuff, so he's very interested in those pieces. And then Mary Miltimore is a public outreach specialist, and she's also very good with graphics. We're going to actually pass around, I think, in a little bit, an example of some of the things that we hope to offer to you here in Milton that she's done for another town just recently, called a placemaking audit. So she's very good with graphics and quick, and things are easy to understand, which we think is very important for getting the message across to all of you and to the public. So with that, I'll turn it back to Sue.
So in the next 10 or 15 minutes, we want to highlight how we specifically will meet your needs. These are the needs that were outlined in your RFP. We think that we're very competitive in all these ways. Having worked with you on your community visioning and having Howard Stein Hudson having worked with you on other projects, we're not going to concentrate on the first two, but we really want to focus on talking about the public process and also about our graphic and outreach capabilities. So those are what we are going to concentrate on in our presentation, and of course you can feel free to ask us as many questions as you want when we get to that piece. So these are some options that we are very familiar with in the public outreach process. We think that the important thing is that we will do whatever it takes to get as many people to the table as possible, and not just numbers, but to make sure that we have a good cross section of your community that to show the diversity that's here. So we really will work hard to do that. In phase one, we made substantial outreach to institutions and to some other civil organizations. We want to build on those things and get more organizations and civic groups and educational groups to work with us to do the outreach. So, for example, in Stoughton, we're working with the Clergy Association. We intend to do that here as well. To work with the faith-based community, and also we have identified a number of civic organizations that are going to help us meet, have outreach to those that don't have language as a first language or have limited use of the English language. So these are all things that will work with you all to define which ones you think will have the most success in your community. We also want to concentrate on working with your boards and committees to involve them in the outreach process and the assessment process. We also want to make sure that we're working with the local television. We think that's a great partnership that we can increase in this phase, increase the use of that in this phase, and are anxious to talk about how we might make that a two-way discussion using television instead of just presenting things. So we're anxious to use any of these strategies for outreach to reach as many people as we can. One piece of the public process that we would like to highlight now is the visual preference survey. So I am going to let Ted tell you a little bit about how we're going to work that.
Okay, thanks, Sue. Well, one of the things that we find to be very effective as far as an outreach tool, especially for people that don't like big, thick planning documents, believe it or not, not everybody's all that interested in reading planning documents, even plan engineers such as Gary. So we found that providing a series of visual indications of building design, different types of streets, open spaces, different aspects, characteristics of your community that people can either will react to and basically give us some feedback in terms of what they like about existing conditions, what they see in terms of future changes, future improvements, things that are important to the community, both existing and potentially in the future. So we're showing a couple of examples. This one's in West Concord Village Center. We did a visual preference survey there. We did a combination of online as well as a board survey we did at a design charrette. And basically people came in and they rated images. We had, let me go back for a second, under these different categories: building design, density and uses, building frontage, facade treatments, parks and open spaces, streetscapes and pedestrian treatments, and then traffic circulation and parking. And this is for a particular village center, but also you can use it applying it town-wide to different districts and what we might call transects, land use transects. So people rated these images both in the workshop as well as online using, in this case, Zoomerang, and gave us some feedback on the things that they liked. So, for example, adaptive reuse. They picked a particular example, in this case from Plymouth, Massachusetts, an old fire station that has been turned into a restaurant, not a very good restaurant, but a popular restaurant. And that sort of thing, it applies well to West Concord. They got some older buildings that they want to see reused, not necessarily demolished, but reused, and they're pretty good about preserving these old buildings. Here's another example in a different situation in Manchester, Connecticut, an urban renewal district, a redevelopment area, where we did it fully online. We got over 600 responses and rated and basically got really good feedback on the types of developments, the types of uses, the integration of open spaces and streets that people sort of envision for this future redevelopment area. It was very helpful in taking that and then shaping the land use regulations. Particularly, we put together a form-based code and coming up with an overall plan so that people could embrace it. It would get approved at town meeting in terms of providing funding for some of the public aspects of the project. So, for example, in this case, there were a few buildings left in that district where they liked the old, still using old public buildings for new restaurant-type uses, the scale of commercial and mixed use they'd like to see in that district, and then the integration of open spaces. Particularly, they had an old, there's a brook in this area that is sort of hidden away. It's a lot of underbrush, and they're trying to expose it and get better connected to it.
Yes.
I think I'm going to, at this point, turn it over to Brian. He's going to talk a little bit about other aspects of visioning.
Thanks. I'm just going to show you a little bit about photo simulations. And what these are before and after pictures that are done in Adobe Photoshop. And what they're useful for is not only help graphically communicating a planning concept or a vision, but it can also be tied into the visual preference survey so that you could test people's reactions to different scenarios in the same picture. So this will just kind of show you the change there. And this is, I did this down in New Jersey, and this was, the simulations you'll see, part of it's directed by the steering committee because they have an idea of sort of changes they're looking for. So here we're talking about changing the landscape of that right away. And this one was for a plan to bury the utilities and add a protected bike lane. And more landscaping, if you had noticed. And this last one was for a hospital campus in Camden, New Jersey. And we did a lot here between streetscape and testing building heights. And one thing, if you'll notice, the building on the left, it maintains that original building height along at the street, but the upper floors step back. It's a massing trick to soften the streetscape there. The other capability we have is SketchUp modeling. And these are just a couple examples of work I've done in the past. And you'll note that two of them, they're not our property. These are models that I did at other places. But we have that capability in hand also to use as a tool of graphic communication to concepts. And I'll turn this back to Ted.
Right. Okay, so basically, you've read through our proposal, and our approach to comprehensive planning is to look at things in terms of land use management districts, or transects. So what we like to do is break down the community into areas that have common characteristics in terms of human landscapes, natural environment, natural or constraints and attributes. So, for example, you're looking at East Milton Square, Central Avenue, Milton Village, to Granite, some of the institutional lands, rural residential areas. They all have particular characteristics that are very important to look at specifically in terms of what those uses are, what the needs are in those particular areas, what the challenges are, and what the future strategy is going to be in terms of land use management and implementation programs. So the idea here, and I wanted to pass out an example of one that we're both working on together in Stoughton, of a transect-based approach to comprehensive planning, is that we would work with the committee and the planning board and the community to determine how we would, basically leading off of the visioning exercises you went through in phase one, trying to determine how we would identify areas in the community that really sort of have common characteristics, and then look at those specific needs. So this is the transect. This is a tool that was generated by Andres Dwani. He's sort of the godfather of new urbanism, and basically it goes from natural zones up to urban cores. And what we were trying to do is define those characteristics in those areas within your community and look at the particular existing conditions, opportunities, and future changes. So there's lots of ways you can do transects. Here's an example of one we did in upstate New York. It's a long corridor that goes from strip development to a beautiful traditional village center and surrounding neighborhoods, and identifying, again, what those characteristics are, what people like and don't like about it through the visual preference survey, and then what we need to do there in the future in terms of changing zoning, adding incentives if it's an economic development target area, design standards for streets and infrastructure, and other sustainability applications in particular that are needed in particular areas of these transects. Another example from a comprehensive plan in Sandwich that we did a few years ago. That was a transect-based comprehensive plan. Again, identifying in each one of these areas, these transects, what the current issues were and the future opportunities, the relationships of those areas with their surrounding areas. So, for example, in the old Sandwich Village, what was its connectivity to the surrounding neighborhoods? Did they have good pedestrian connections with sidewalks? What were some of the particular issues in terms and rubs in terms of land uses? There were some areas where Some of the commercial was budding, very closely to residential, and there was some concerns in the neighborhoods. What the potential is for future development, and is the relationship between the public sector, i.e. the public space, the streets, the civic spaces, the open spaces, facilities, are they there to support those particular districts? So for example, if we're talking about a village center like East Milton Square, is the parking there, is it well supporting the businesses that are there? Are there things that can be changed to improve it? Are there connections, pedestrian connections to the surrounding areas? Are there streetscape enhancements can be made? Are there encroachments on the sidewalks, like outdoor dining or sandwich board signs, or other small incremental things that could help make these more vital areas? And so it's that type of analysis, and it's that specific to certain areas that is our approach to comprehensive planning. So here's an example from Stoughton, which is ongoing as we speak. Looking at, and we broke down this into 13 different transects, starting with the town center, the surrounding neighborhoods. Here's an example of a suburban neighborhood, very different, you can see very different development patterns, settlement patterns, and infrastructure patterns. A neighborhood business district, a small, oriented towards, the surrounding residential community. Highway commercial corridor, again, a lot of strip development in this particular area that they want to address. It has its own particular needs in terms of infrastructure and streetscape improvements, as well as the potential economic opportunities for infill development, because there's way too much parking they could ever need up in that area, and all kinds of opportunities to connect internally with these parking lots. Large business district, this is where IKEA is, and the large Target, and some other furniture type stores. They got big plans for this particular area. And then there are more rural residential areas. There's some parts of Stoughton that are very rural, and the focus there is really conservation, using a lot of CPA money to protect and preserve historic landscapes and cultural landscapes. So we, once we define those particular areas, then we do a more thorough analysis. So this is an example of the town center, where we go through and we look at the context and setting and characteristics. This is looking at the settlement patterns, connectivity, access, walkability, basically how the town center is connecting to its surrounding neighborhoods, how walkable it is, what the particular density patterns are. This is looking at uses. Are these the types of uses that people want to see in the future, or are there other changes? And then how well that corresponds with what's on the books in terms of zoning and land use regulations. And we find that there's lots of conflicts between zoning and traditional village centers. This is no different here. What the circulation network and pattern is, the access, again, connecting to surrounding neighborhoods and then to other districts around town. How well is the parking helping or hurting the economic development potential in the town center? The use of public the streets, how are we utilizing the right-of-way as far as, in this particular area, helping to assist economic development, business development? So what's the combination of travel lanes, parking lanes, streetscape improvements, again, and those encroachments such as outdoor dining and so on. And then looking at how well the civic and public spaces are integrated into this particular transect, how far they are and how well they're used by people that are working in the district or living in or nearby the district. How far out is a comfortable walking distance from these civic spaces to the neighborhoods. Again, trying to attract more people into the village center. So from there, I'm going to turn it on to turn over to Sue.
And this is where we get points for being brief.
Were we brief?
So we just want to end with why you should choose us, which is for those of you who've worked with us in phase one, I hope that you will agree that we are responsive, we are flexible. If we need to change the approach, if we need to change the way we're doing something, we will do it. We answer to you, and we realize that the answers for your community are going to come from you, so we follow that directive. We also have really created depth in our team with this. We have experts in graphics, in public outreach, in economic assessment and analysis, in transportation planning, in open space and recreation planning. We really have brought together a team that can really look comprehensively at your town. And if you haven't checked out all our resumes, I encourage you to do that, and I think that you'll see that we have a great depth in our team. Our approach, I think, may be different than what you've seen. We're proposing to do design charrettes in different areas, and then bring it all together in a final community-wide forum. We think that that will work very well for your community, just knowing what we do about it. So we lay that out there for you to consider, and we're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Great, well, I'll open it up, Bob.
Knowing what you know about Milton, what do you see as your biggest challenge?
Oh, that's great. I would say that the biggest challenge that I see is to create a belief that, or maybe it's the process more than the final plan. What I would like to say at the end of this process is that we have changed the way people think about planning and their belief that when they plan something as a community, that there is buy-in and that they can get it accomplished. So I think changing the face of what planning is in Milton is our biggest challenge. And also, I just think I really look forward to doing that, because I think that we can.
The Stoughton report that you passed around, was that a final product? Or
No,
that's
that's
the analysis.
That's just a preliminary product. It was basically our first shot with the planning board, in fact, last night, to talk about the idea of breaking this into transects into districts and making sure that we got the right boundaries, we've got the right boundaries and characteristics in these different areas. So it's a work in progress, but it's basically a starting point for sort of tying together the rest of the comprehensive plan. We've done the existing conditions analysis, and now we're getting to, all right, what do we need in these particular areas? This is a suburban neighborhood. What do they think they need? What do they like about what's there? What would they like to see change? Maybe they want another park so that they don't have to drive 4 miles, 5 miles into town to go to, one of the soccer fields. In town center, we know what they want. They want TOD, they want safer crosswalks, they want business development, they want to help the small business owner.
Well, when I understand that that's a concept, that's basically an analysis.
Yeah.
And you didn't talk at all about how you get from that analysis to a product at the end that's implementable. What is something that the planning board can use as a guide in analyzing what comes in front of us over the next 10 years?
Well, the existing conditions analysis there was basically a lot of sort of data.
Yeah.
We didn't have a lot of graphics. So basically, this is sort of making sort of the connection to the implementation. We're providing sort of a visual framework so that people can respond to. All right, so these are the characteristics that are there today, and supplement that with things like the visual preference survey. What do you like about what's there today? What do you want to see in the future? And then that translates into specific actions. So that, for example, in the town center, we'll have specific recommendations for the train station.
Sure.
We'll have specific recommendations for how business development opportunities. We're going to do a gap analysis there as well. And so we'll know what those opportunities are, where they might fit in, and what other things we can do to support business development. They have terrible sign regulations, for example. They don't allow projecting signs. There's no real limits on certain types of signs that are not particularly attractive. So we're going to have to shape some recommendations as far as that goes. There's other economic incentives that can be put in place there that I think will really help open up the opportunities. There's a lot of things that are sort of standing in the way of simple, business development opportunities that we can put into the implementation program, which we think will be immediately effective.
Okay, but the ultimate product is not a graphic.
No,
package.
No, it's not.
It's an implementable guideline.
Right.
Which is it's a report.
It's a report. That's the graphic.
You started by saying you didn't like reports. So
And would be supported by graphics.
Well, it's supported by graphics, right. I like reports, I'm a planner, I like reports, but a lot of people don't, so they like the graphics to help them understand. As a tool, where we're headed, where we are today and where we want to be in the future, yeah. So if you look at some of our examples, like we just finished the downtown plan for Turner's Falls, you'll see that there's a lot of graphics in there that really illustrate the type of improvements that we're talking about. And there it's about street activation. It's about basically pouring out on the sidewalk. They have these big wide sidewalks and don't allow, a lot of outdoor dining. So pour out on it, and we show them, through SketchUp basically, how to do that. And the specific regulations that need to be in place to make that happen.
So I should say too, we are happy to either send through Bill those kinds of examples as well, so you can kind of see what a final product might look like as opposed to.
Another example, we're working on Peabody's downtown plan. We're doing a visual preference there as well. So we're showing, they're concerned about, facades and business development as well. And we're showing them, basically a cross-section of their Main Street. It's a beautiful old Main Street, really nice buildings. But they don't do anything with the window treatments, with the signage. So we're showing that cross-section, which is almost identical to State Street in Newburyport, and just showing them from a perspective of somebody driving or walking, what the difference is. And it's really about the treatment of the storefronts and the signage. You cannot see. They also don't allow projecting signs. So as you're driving, you don't see any of the businesses. You go right past them, you never notice that there's wonderful restaurants there. So it's simple tools like that can really help a business thrive.
Well, just to build upon a little bit about what the points you were just making, I was walking with someone who lived in Milton for a long time in East Milton Square the other day, and she said, do you know, there used to be a chocolate shop over here, and there used to be, this shop here, and now we have a lot of the same thing. You know, we have real estate offices and hair salons and, spas, and we don't have the variety that we used to have. So can we get some of that variety by what we do with planning in East Milton Square?
I think you can. Obviously you have to do the gap analysis to determine what opportunities really exist there. And I would think, I haven't done any analysis at this point, but I would think there's lots of opportunities.
I guess my question really is, can the planning and the zoning really help support, a stronger and more diverse?
It absolutely can. I don't know what the zoning says today, so it's hard to answer that question, but I would think that there's lots of opportunities. It's a matter of, zoning is just one of the issues. Ownership is another issue. Parking is an issue for a lot of, particular possible tenants. A lot of franchises won't take spaces in these small village centers because they don't think there's adequate parking, unless there's a really, really, really strong market. So there's a lot of factors to think about, and we would certainly be looking at that in East Milton Square as well as Central Ave, as Milton Village, and try to determine, beyond just the market opportunities, what are some of the other particular issues that may be holding back those districts.
It's one of the things that, if I may follow up?
Yeah.
Just that strikes me about, some of what we think of in Milton as being built out and opportunities being more incremental than large scale.
Yeah.
And it seems to me the kinds of analysis that you're doing in Stoughton is the kind of analysis that would be appropriate for Milton, because it really is taking a look at what's there, what's working, what's not working, what can be better, and how to knit those together. And I think that's really where probably the larger opportunity is.
Absolutely.
And then it's having a big picture look at where else things can get maybe new growth, but knowing that it's really probably going to come from areas that are already built.
Well, my background is not just as a planning consultant, but I used to be the Business Improvement District Director in Hyannis, another small village, and in Fitchburg, downtown Fitchburg. And, there's all kinds of grand plans in every place you go, and typically they don't materialize rapidly, if at all. So I'm always looking for incremental opportunities to improve business opportunities, economic development. And that's really, particularly in areas like this, which are well-established villages, that's really it. So in Hyannis, it was, obviously, it's a seasonal place, and one of the concerns was that 30% of the businesses close in the wintertime. So what we try to do is do some promotion and marketing so that people would come down and understand that there's a real cluster of restaurants there, 50 of them from one side of Main Street to the other. And we put that out there as far as maps and promotional materials, and we got more people to come in. We coupled that with better use of the town common there. We had public market out there. We had bands on Friday nights, and basically just the small things that really helped pick up the local economy there. And there were big plans to do infill development and redevelopment, but those take time. There's lots of things you can do in the interim to really make a difference.
Cheryl,
if I may just
yes.
make one more last comment. To Cheryl, to your specific point, I think one of the things that planning can do is, once you determine what uses you'd like to see there, figure out ways to encourage those uses. So, I mean, you can't force somebody to open up a nice cafe down there, but you could make it a conducive regulatory environment for them to do so.
Yeah. Well, another example is Norwood. Did the downtown plan for Norwood a couple years ago with Cecil. And, one of the recommendations was not to think about tearing down old buildings, but filling them up. And we did a market analysis there and determined what are the opportunities that exist. And one of them was a shoe store. They had dearly missed their old shoe store. And so rather than, trying to, make, cold calls to, big companies, we suggested they go out to regional, well-established shoe stores and see if they needed a second location. And in fact, that's what they did, and they got one back within a year. They got a new shoe store. So it's those types of small changes I think can make a big difference.
Vic, and then Michael.
I think the ultimate success of this master plan is based upon participation, and I think we had a good first. Those of us who were involved with the visioning aspect of the master plan, we had a good first go at it. But I think in order to get to this next step, which is it's ambitious but it's doable, is to really increase that participation. I guess it's to Sue and Brian who've been through this. I said, what are your plans to increase this participation? Because unless we get a lot more people involved, I'm a little concerned maybe we're not going to get where we all want to go, if at all.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I definitely think that your participation, you can get the plan done regardless of how many participate, but you won't get it implemented until you've got real participation, and that's what the goal is to do, of course. So I think it's several things. We understood when we did the first phase where we were lacking in some of the places. Some of the groups that we needed were the minority and non-English speaking or communities. We thought that we could do a better job reaching out to the faith-based communities and to the business community in particular. And what we are looking at doing is targeting specific organizations that can help us reach those. So, for example, at the end of the last project, I spoke at length with people who were involved in education of very young children, and what they saw was really they could address the needs of they could see that housing was a big issue, and that finding adequate food was a big issue. Not what you would think of when you were, not what I thought that I would get out of these people. I thought they would be talking about schools, but I think what the important thing is that they know how to reach the people that will show the diversity and get different people than that we wouldn't typically get in the planning process, and that's what I would like to do, is piggyback on the many different organizations that are going to reach many different community members and get them in. I mean, I showed you some of the ways that we would reach out to people, and I think there are as many ways as that you can imagine. I think the important thing is we will do whatever it takes to do that, and hopefully if you can cull our references, you'll see that we are doing just that in many. I don't mind cold calling and reaching out to organizations to say, how can you help us reach people in your community, as I did with the Clergy Association in Stoughton, which is now on board with us and is going to help us. So that's your answer. I couldn't agree more.
Michael?
Just in terms of following up, it actually ties into that too, the community participation. You mentioned about the majority of master plans don't get implemented. is a big piece of that community participation. Are there other things that we can be aware of and therefore try to circumvent in terms of getting something that's going to work for a long term?
My experience is that a lot of master plans are too generic to get implemented. And I think that if you're doing it by area, these transects, and you know the specific challenges and opportunities, and you involve the people from those areas so they have a real buy-in, and through the different organizations and institutions, that's a really good way to make that connection. Then you can be much more specific about what the implementation needs to be and how that all sort of weaves together into a big sort of quilt that represents the entire town. So we do very specific implementation programs. So example, if you go online and look at sandwiches, you'll see that it's very specific. It's laid out so that there are specific leaders, whether it's a certain board or certain institutions in town or other organizations. There's a timeline for it. There's potential funding sources, and there's reporting back on an annual basis to the Board of Selectmen. Where are we with these particular programs? But I think having them based by Transect really helps people buy into the process and define specifically what needs to be done. Because what needs to be done in East Milton Square is entirely different, from my perspective, than Central Avenue. And institutions all have their own plans.
So as long as everyone buys into the portion that they have an interest in,
Well, I think
they have a concern about, then you have enough mass to get the whole thing to keep going.
I think that helps really, get to the particular issues that need to be addressed, yeah.
Breaks it into edible chunks, it becomes more tangible for people to be involved.
Right.
Any more questions? Yeah, Mike?
Do you see Milton as a challenge relative to the fact that in terms of overuse, but built out? I mean, I look at this picture of Stoughton, I see more public parking in that snapshot.
And they think they have a public, I've never been to a village center that doesn't have a public parking problem. Whether it's perception or reality, it's a problem.
Too much or too little.
They have no public parking. But I mean, there's more open space in their commercial district.
There's
than
lots
there
of
is in
vacant
Milton.
lots, yeah.
I mean, how do you, have you ever come across a town that you could say was very relative to the situation in Milton where it's, I think of East Milton Square, in order to create parking, you'd have to knock something down, but now you're limiting the business because you're eliminating a business.
Exactly,
I mean, you'd have to almost build up to doing it. It's very...
It's a tough balance, and in my experience is that all village centers have that constraint. You go to the shopping centers, you have more parking you can ever possibly use. This is a much different environment, and it's what makes New England, New England. So what really is important is that there's a balance of parking, public and private, that it's well distributed, and that it's easy to find. If you can solve those problems, address those issues first, a lot of times it's people not knowing where the parking is. And just getting into those spaces really helps out. Again, an incremental thing that can make a big difference. Yeah, there are going to be opportunities here and there to add on to your parking system and connect existing parking lots. But those are longer term or medium term type opportunities. So let's do some of the small things first and see how that works, and we'll take it from there. I know in Brattleboro that was a challenge. Brattleboro is a very dense downtown, and it's very lively. Brattleboro, Vermont, yeah. But they had, and the ratio that I like for downtowns is 1 space per 400. If you got that and it's well distributed, you can usually do all right. Brattleboro was about 1 space per 200, or it was much lower. But they did a very good job of letting people know where the public parking was, and that made all the difference with a pretty small ratio of parking.
Yeah, and I would say that making a really compelling public realm helps immensely, because if you have a really compelling public realm and people like to walk around your downtown, then it's okay to walk a couple blocks to where you park, because it's just good getting there and not just being there.
I said 1 to 800 is really what it is. We're actually working in Wellesley Square right now on public parking.
I mean, I can visualize Wellesley, and I can visualize parking on the street, which just doesn't even exist.
There is parking on the street.
I don't even know it that well.
Yeah. But there's lots of parking behind the building that people aren't aware of. And some simple signage would make a big difference there.
There's nothing else. I think that brings us to the end of this. Thank you all very much for
Thank
coming.
you.
Thank you so much.
And we should be letting you know soon.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Make sure you get everything back.
All right.
Fresh eyes.
We'll let Bill start gathering things, and then we'll have a conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again.
I didn't know if Bill wanted to give me my flash drive back. That's what he's getting.
He's working on it. And then the three of you along the wall are welcome to take that bottom set now. Yeah, I thought it might be.
Then you plug into your computer.
David, do you want to join us along the... All right, everyone. So, the planning board obviously is going to need to vote, but we want to hear your thoughts first. What struck you about the three different teams? What did you like? What did you not like? What concerns do you have? Let's have a few minutes discussion.
Nobody mentioned that we really don't have a town center.
That's a good point.
Because we don't have one.
Nobody looked at that as a particular problem, and I think it's a big problem.
Okay. What else? What other thoughts?
Reject them all.
A lot of people in Milton, I think, don't think it's a problem, actually. I think a lot of people like that we're a fragmented town.
What else?
I like the idea of VBH or VHB is working with Quincy. And we're right next to Quincy. What's gonna affect them is definitely gonna affect us. Transportation, if we can integrate transportation from, instead of everyone going to Boston, could they go to Quincy to get on the T? And instead of going backwards to go forwards, but it could be easier. So I don't know if that would help us at all.
Okay. That's a good point. What else?
Well, I kind of see community circle as being very conceptual, much stronger on a conceptual perspective. But that they don't have a lot of the backup in terms of the staff in order to be able to, but I would see them having problems turning around a work product or turning around a report that was thorough as VHB could produce. I saw VHB as being, the term I used was, well, corporate, or they have a form that they would provide a report that was very articulate and was very well analyzed, but they might be lacking in terms of artistic perspective or opportunities. But on the counter to that, having a format that you can count on and that you can use to do your analysis gives you the opportunity to focus on the things that might be lacking in that someone else doesn't have the time to focus on. So that's a good thing in a different perspective. And then in terms of Brown Walker, their involvement in the process to this point, I think gives them a leg up. And then the collaborations with what's the name? Yes, that they bring a lot of. I know them as a firm, and I know that they have a lot of mass behind them in terms of being able to turn things around. So the fact that Brown Walker was actually ran the first phase, and the fact that they brought in the other firm I think it's really, they're in the best position in terms of the overall picture of things. But
Okay.
that's just my perspective.
I think Brown Walk was weak
I don't think they were
in the
even
initial
close.
phases.
I don't even think they were closely suited to what we'd be looking at.
Well,
as-
the
You mean,
initial
I'm
three-
sorry, do you mean in the first phase?
In the first phase.
Or in this presentation?
In the first phase.
Mhm.
Maybe that's against them, the other, didn't the opportunity to do it, but I thought that we didn't bring a lot of people in to the community events. I don't know if it was our fault, the town's fault.
I thought that was, that's just general public participation.
I
People
think-
just,
I think
or
it
lack
was-
of, that's.
Circle had a very good grasp of that, and I don't think it was totally a joke when he said we'd go to the tavern if we need to go to the tavern. I mean, you should go to the high school football game, you should go to the high school basketball. There's people that are gonna say, well, there's a planning meeting tonight, and they're gonna say, I'd rather go to the high school football game, I ain't going to that. And that's where you gotta go to the high school football game and either pass out questionnaires or just quiz people walking in and out.
Halftime show, Mike?
I'm sorry?
A halftime show.
At the halftime, have a halftime show? You got a captured audience. But I mean, I thought they made a very good point about that. With due respect to what you said about Quincy, I grew up in Quincy, and when I was about 30 years old and wanted to go to my nephew's Little League game in Milton, I had to get directions. And I think you'd be better off if it stayed that way.
True, but we have to face it.
All right, I've got Ellen and then Cheryl.
I think they all have strengths, and I think it's partly a question of what we want the focus to be and what our priorities are. I think that, I don't know, maybe it's just the time of night. I liked Brown Walker when we worked with them in the first phase. I somehow didn't feel like they brought a lot to the table tonight, and I don't know whether it's my blood sugar level or that's my bedtime, I don't know, but I just didn't feel like there was enough there. Although I really liked them in the first phase. I really feel like, for me, the issues that we're going to face are community participation, and I feel like Community Circle was very convincing. I agree with you. They were very convincing about that, and also implementation. And they were very convincing about that. You know, if you don't have the list and, you know, who's responsible, and it doesn't matter if we think it's a good idea, if nobody's going to take ownership, it's not going to happen. I think they had a lot of good things to say about what I think are the two real weaknesses, and one is participation and the other is implementation. And I guess I feel like with AECom, they have a lot of depth. You know, they can produce reports, and, you know, they've got those technical skills. And I liked the people. My own personal feeling, I liked that VHB brought the real estate and economic expertise to the table, which I thought was a real strength. But they felt a little, for Milton, they felt a little corporate. And I thought their economic guy was great, but I think he would encounter some negative reactions in the town from people who, you know, want a lower tax base, but they don't really want economic development anywhere near them. You know? So I felt like maybe they were a little too big for us, as a town.
Cheryl and then Tom. Yep.
Ellen said pretty much what I was going to say, except I will also add, I think they were unique in that they had the fellow who's been on both sides of the table in terms of being the planner in a couple of towns and being involved in implementation and understanding what makes implementation work. And I think, you know, the suggestion that they'd work with the department heads, you know, during the process is really important. And then having the follow-up, I'm not sure if it was them or someone else who had that follow-up, actually reporting follow-up, I thought was a fabulous thing, and we should definitely take that idea, whoever it came from.
Yeah, good idea. Okay, Tom?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Ellen and what Cheryl said too. I think that I didn't think that Brown Walker's presentation tonight was all that good. I don't think they really talked about implementation and getting an idea of, how they would go about the implementation phase, as well as VHB and the Community Circle did. I didn't think they explained. I didn't think they were as innovative in their outreach as the other two. The other two were kind of similar in using, bringing technology in where they needed to, and some really unique technology, but then also no technology and explaining how they did that. I guess what I liked about Community Circle was that you were getting the principals of those organizations. They were small and they were very, very experienced. I think more experienced than some of the people that we might have seen at VHB, at least in terms of the person that was going to be the lead person. I don't think was as experienced as the community circle lead person. I do think, like somebody said, that Brown Walker has a leg up, that they have some institutional knowledge with from the phase one, and that Howard Stein Hudson has just done so many things in the town over the years that giving that institutional knowledge could be very valuable.
I was kind of disappointed in Brown Walker, thinking that they should have a leg up, and that they should have, it should have been easier for me to listen to, and they should have, I think, gotten it. But it seemed like the questions that I had and the others had just didn't come to the surface. I was not impressed with the written report. It just seemed to be, it actually was full of small errors, but more or less typos, but it just didn't look like it was proofread well. And I was in the sitting around town going to wrestling matches and track meets and other things with my kids. I didn't bump into a single person that heard that we were going through a master planning period, or that it was something that the public was supposed to be involved in. That was your job as the planning commission to do, and we're going to listen and wait to hear what they decide. I said, well, wait a minute, didn't you get any of these? And of course, I'm on the email list, and maybe they weren't, but I'm not so sure that it's up to the town to be pursuing it. That should be their ability to get a hold of us. VHB, I thought was very well put together, but didn't get the, I guess they could call it the warm and fuzzy, but they hit all the right points. And the community circle, I thought Daphne was the weak link, personally. I thought she just didn't have all the technical expertise that I thought that Angus Jennings or Jeff, what's his name, from AECom, seemed to really have all of those solutions already thought out, and they'd reviewed the Brown Walker stuff and really knew the details, so I was very impressed with that.
Paul, and then Ellen, and then Dick.
Someone asked a question, was it $100,000 budget?
Yeah, that's what you've got.
We get some big suits here.
Yep.
Are they gonna work? There's 4 people there. That's $25,000 just between those 4. They get underlings and everything else. Are they gonna be able to just get the ball rolling? Yeah, are they just gonna get the ball rolling and leave it off to their 400 associates?
Yes, that's,
VHB,
there's
you're
a,
talking about, yeah.
in the
But
back of their
Brown Walker
proposal, they
is
explain
smaller,
that.
Earthier, crunchy group, it seems, almost like. That, we're $100,000, that's $1,000. They're gonna work harder for us.
Ellen, and then Dick, and then I think I've got a few questions for you guys and the board to think about, so.
So to your comment about Daphne from Community Circle, I spoke with somebody today in my office who has worked with many of the people at many of these firms, and she absolutely raved about Daphne in terms of public process and what she brings to the table. And I guess I felt like there were a couple of things that they did that I really liked. One was at the very beginning with the introductions, they wanted to hear what everybody's goals were before they even started their presentation. And it didn't take much time, but they learned a lot about us. And I think if that's how they act in public meetings, that was very telling. And I liked that they had dinner here in town before the meeting. I think that's really nice, and it's they're engaged. So, and the fact that they have such training and facilitation and mediation, which I think I just think our issue is, one of our issues is getting people to come to the meetings, and I think they would be the strongest in that. So.
I agree with what Cheryl and Ellen have been saying. Participation to me is the big thing here. So we're going to have this thing work. We have to get as many people, the silent minority, so to speak, to get involved in this process, and how we get them there is really their job. I think that the only concern I have with VHB, I get the sense it's such a big firm. I almost feel like that at some point we might get a report that it might have just they take off that first page and say, here you go. I was totally taken back by Brown Walker. I thought I was giving Sue a softball. She had been with us. She knew what the problems were, getting people out, and I didn't really get a sense that you really had thought it completely through with a really good, tight answer. And my only caveat with Community Circle, I think you know where I'm going with this thing, is that we'd have to take a look at their workload, and they'd have to give us some sort of assurance they're not getting, they didn't just get 5 other contracts and all of a sudden we're vying for their attention.
One of the questions I have for the master plan committee members in particular is, obviously we all got feedback about how the process went for the first phase, and that's actually one of the valuable reasons for splitting it into 2 phases. You do the first process, get some ideas, and figure out. And one of them was, and this is not meant to be a reflection on anybody here, the comment came from somebody who is a trained facilitator and thought that simply for purposes in the town, it would be better to have people facilitating who were not from Milton. So that the people at the table, she said, I did not experience bias from anybody who was facilitating, but just in general, I think, and this is what I think I heard that from maybe one other person. So, you know what I know. Community Solutions would, with 4 people, maybe bringing in a few more from AECOM, would probably have to draw on the committee as facilitators. Some of them have done it before, some of us haven't. VHB, of course, has the ability to pull from their whole firm to do facilitation. And Brown Walker and HSH could probably, because HSH is so much bigger, Brown Walker alone couldn't facilitate, and that's why they had us. How do you feel about the necessity, if we don't have facilitators from our planning firm, we're going to be back in the pool of facilitators. How do you feel about that? Did you enjoy it? Would you go through the training again? Do you think that this was a valid comment? Do you have any questions on? So that's my first question to you, is that's more work for us, and think about that. Yep.
I don't think our training was as productive as it could have been.
That's true, and that is partly the town as a whole fault in that we were at the library and they kicked us out early because they've got rules.
Well, if we had a professional facilitator kind of training, like some of these folks said they've had, charrette facilitator training.
Right.
And I know there's, like, I think Sue and Brian did it for us, right?
Right.
So if I'm not concerned about having us participate again if we can get some better training.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that?
I just found it confusing.
Okay.
Their leadership wasn't there. And we walked in, we were given a piece of paper sometimes, we said, okay, this is what we're gonna do, and it was scattered, especially the last one at high school. It was scattered.
But we didn't get the material until a day or two before, and, if you were in a meeting that day or, committed with your time that day, it's very hard to prepare for that forum if you didn't have enough,
And this is why I'm stressing, this is not a reflection on anybody around this table. I'm just
speaking from my personal opinion on these things, and my experience. That's all.
Yeah. Yep.
I agree with Cheryl in terms of the training. I did Paul also mentioned that, but personally, I like to be involved with it. If I don't like to get information secondhand, and I think that sometimes you're better off with people that you've seen around town, they feel familiar with you, that you can probably draw a little bit more information as a follow-up question to them without leading them to in any sort of particular direction.
Okay.
So when you go back and report back, you can actually say, gee, I think this is a pretty good point we haven't heard from before, and everyone participated in the group.
And then the other question I have for the group as a whole is some of the low-tech or no-tech outreach methods that we would use with any of the 3 firms will probably require extra participation from us. Whether it's having the picnic in the field, the open tent kind of idea, potluck suppers were mentioned in the last one, and the schedule for the first phase was so tight, we didn't really have an opportunity to do as many of these outreach things. But just to make you think about, get your comments back on the fact that with some of these, we'll need to put in a few extra hours and do some outreach of our own. So, anybody else have anything they want to say? Because if not, I think the board needs to have some discussion.
I think I'd just like to mention some of the comments about VHB enormity of them. I had directed their actual for a long time, and the guy was defending the report he did, and I finally questioned him something in particular in the report, and he couldn't answer it. He had his name on the report, but he finally admitted, I didn't write that report.
Good to know. Well, Mike, since you started off, what do you think?
I like Circle.
You like
I
Circle?
like some of the comments they made. I like the discussion you just presently had right there. They said, not call elected, we're gonna go to them. We're gonna go to the people. We're not gonna, it's hard to draw people. You say, next Tuesday night, there's a meeting at 6. You'll get a lot of the people that'll come regularly to anything like that. But the vast majority of the people that live in town, like you say, the silent majority of the people that are the real people of the town, they're busy. They gotta do this, they gotta do that. And like I said, they'd much rather go to their kid's high school game than do that. It's just that they feel more informed like that. So I like the idea, they said, we need to go to the people. I also like a comment they made that none of the others really even hit on, and that is that they would let go of an idea or a concept that they see that it just isn't going to work here. It's a nice idea, but it's just not really going to work. So let's not even pursue that and waste time.
Bernie, what do you think?
Well, going back to one of my expertise is the television.
Yeah.
They all wanted the two-way communications. They wanted calling in. I mean, it's one thing for us to put out something that, you know, the television doesn't talk to you, but the phone, if people want to call and talk. So, like Mike says, I think Common Circle is, they want to use local television, call in.
I think Ron Walker's ruled out as far as I'm concerned. I think I hear it across the board. First, Circle, I thought was too slick entirely. Everything was accused, and next person spoke, and bang, next person spoke. I think VHB, I thought was a little bit more human and a little more to my liking.
Alex?
What's that?
Well, I read the reports. I thought the community circles was not very well written. I think that Brown Walker's also could have used a little work. It seemed to me that VHB had a much better written response to the RFP than the others. And since writing is going to be important, I took that quite seriously. I was put off by the fact that the community circle basically talked about nothing but outreach. It didn't talk very much about planning and what it was going to do to actually earn the $100,000 other than do all the outreach and put up tents. Mr. Jennings apparently is, he mentions that he was involved in the adoption of 40R smart growth zoning. And I've got to say that I think 40R smart growth zoning is one of the biggest misses that the Commonwealth has had in the planning area for some time. And I can't, you know, anyone who wants to take credit for that it doesn't make me feel better about it. I thought that to me, VHB discussed planning, what they would do, the importance of implementation. I looked at those master plans that they produced, and there were page after page of implementation, detailed implementation, the most important part of the plan. I was impressed with Angela Vincent. I think that she looks to me like she would be extremely capable and make sure that we got value for our money. And in my view, VHB was far and away the best among the three.
So going into this, I did my little score sheets, and VHB and Community Circle were very, very close. VHB's proposal was beautifully written and organized, and we have to remember that this process will last 13, 14 months or so, but the written document is what we're going to be dealing with for the next 5, 10, 15 years. That's what's going to stick. So what I was looking for is a balance between getting people there, the community participation, getting their ideas, and also ensuring that we had a product that was lasting, that was engaging, that people would in fact want to read because it meant something to them. I was also concerned, as many people were, is VHB too big for a community of our size? Are they too corporate? Are they going to give us a cookie cutter report? And I went through the website where all of these were posted, also had the work samples posted. And I went through all of those, and the reports are in fact very different in look and feel. And it didn't feel like it was going to be, oh, you know, we're going to take this cover off and put that cover on. So that was good. Their presentation was good. It was organized, which the other two were not as well organized, I felt. And I'm thinking, you know, it's all about when you get people there, making sure that they're engaged. And if you have a bunch of people come to the first event and it's not well organized and it goes on forever, they may not want to come back. And then it doesn't matter how much outreach you've done, because somebody will come to a meeting and say, this is great. I really enjoyed it, to two of their friends. Somebody will go to a meeting and say, oh my God, this is the worst thing I've ever been to, and they'll tell 10 of their friends. And so, you know, the negative news always travels more quickly. So I was impressed by their proposal, the organization, the clarity of the writing, the graphics, and the fact that they actually addressed the methodology for all of the elements in their proposal. Community Circle actually in their proposal, although it was less well organized than VHB, also addressed the various elements. Brown Walker really fell down on that. I was actually quite surprised to see what was not addressed in the scope, knowing the priorities that the town identified during the vision plan. So I was deeply disappointed at the proposal level, and like many others, I was disappointed with the presentation today. I would be comfortable with either VHB or Community Circle. I think they both have their strengths, they both have their weaknesses. I think the Master Plan Committee, the Planning Board, the town could be working with either of them. I will have to say, from my personal bias, that we need good, solid economic data to address many of the issues that people have brought up over the last couple of years, where people are saying, well, I want this here, I don't want that there, I think we should bring in this type of business, and it's wonderful to think about creative ideas that could happen, but we don't have the data to back that up. Because of that, I tend towards VHB with the RKG team. So, you know, they had somebody who clearly knew what they were doing with the economics. I don't think the other two teams were as strong on that. But I could be happy with either of those two ones. So, we just need a motion.
How did Ed vote? Did you vote for?
We haven't voted
We
yet.
haven't voted. I'm waiting for a motion.
What did you just talk about?
Well, I said that I'd be happy with either, but I lean towards VHB.
Okay.
Ed was VHB, Mike was
So VHB wins.
Community
Well,
Circle.
we're
But we haven't
going
had a
to,
vote.
I'm
Mike
going to,
and myself
I'm going,
voted for.
wait,
We haven't voted.
Well,
Alex
I'm
is trying to
kidding.
make
Okay,
a
go
motion.
ahead.
If you take a second,
Yes.
you probably can't deny what you said about VHB, but I think you are getting a little bit of a cookie cutter. I think probably 90% of the verbiage in here is repetitive.
if you read it, there is incredible depth of detail about Milton.
Yeah, and I will say, one of the things that really impressed me about their presentation is that they clearly read the Phase 1 document, and as they brought up their experience, they tied it back to what they'd seen in the Phase 1 document. I mean, it wasn't just a matter of going and getting pictures of Milton and slotting them in, because anybody who takes the time can do that. Although they did take the time to do that. Those pictures were of Milton and not of other communities. But they had, in both here and in their presentation, they'd read phase one and they tied it in, and that was impressive.
Again, Circle had a better concept of getting in touch with people. I think VHB came in again with all the electronic stuff.
I agree, that's a weakness.
I don't know too many of my neighbors are gonna sit around and punch the button.
Yeah, I absolutely agree that's a weakness. They started to address their non-technological outreach at the end. If we'd had more time, that was actually one of my questions for them.
I don't think the guys in the suits are gonna go out to the football game like that.
Well,
what
are you going to accomplish? What are you going to
that.
accomplish at the football game?
We've got technology to take care of that. We can generate numbers and get you a report. Like somebody commented, hey, anybody can generate numbers and create a report.
Ellen?
I'm not sure how you're planning on voting, but one thought that might be helpful is if you rank them, each person ranks them and gives them points. And then, because, it seems like the board may be a little bit split. And, maybe everybody would agree on a second choice, but, some people's first and third, I don't know. But rather than each person picking one firm, I think you might get a better group consensus if you do a point system.
Okay, I'm going to take Dick and Cheryl because I see hands. We're
I
going to
just
bring
have
it back.
one-
We're then going to bring it back to the
I
board.
just have
for
one comment
discussion.
on the RFPs, and having worked for a couple of major investment management firms, we had groups of people, that's all they did. The RFP came in, we gave it to these kids, they did it, they turned around, you put your name on it, they sent it out. So I can see that being a major difference between VHP and a smaller firm like,
Community
Community Circle. And that's the only comment that I have. I mean, I said I didn't have a chance to reread the whole thing, but when I hear that type of, and I think Alec's made a good point. It's very, very good stuff. But when you see stuff from Goldman Sachs and Salomon Brothers versus Eastern Bank, it's going to be different.
But you might have an easier time getting in touch with Eastern.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, some of the points I think about VHB can be founded. You may find some of these people that sat here tonight, when you go to get in contact with them, I've got Larry Smith taking care of that. You give him a call.
Cheryl?
I just think that one of the really lessons learned in the first phase was this participation, and that you're not going to get buy-in from the town if they don't feel as if the participation was as comprehensive as it could be. So if you took, amongst yourselves and decided to rate, who do you think is going to do the best outreach and the best community process? Who do you think is going to write the best report? Who's going to have the best implementation plan? And then identify who on that team is going to do each of these things. Are you confident that you're going to get that person who is sitting at that table doing that piece of this part? That's, in a way, I think if you have, a mix like you do on who you think, that's what you might want to go through. Because in the end, if you have a great report that's well written, but people feel like nobody participated in it, I don't think the implementation is going to be there. I just don't think the people will support it.
That's a very good point.
But the participation, it seems to me, one of the problems that you have is that you have to have a well-designed program for people to participate in, because if you participate in a process that is not thoughtful and well-designed, you're not going to produce the sort of results that you want. And so I agree that participation is important, but I think that participation program design is probably more important than the participation. In other words, you get your well, if you've got a terrible program, it doesn't matter how much participation you have, because you're going to get a terrible result.
But you can rally around a lot of people.
You could rally around a lot of people, and you can end up wasting all of their time.
Are we checking the references here?
And?
I didn't yet. I listened and I will.
Should we
think
do that first?
Yeah, we're going to vote for that.
Well,
We should do that
this
first.
is actually a problem, is we're already a month late because Community Circle couldn't meet until September because of vacations. So we were hoping to vote tonight. I will say, I mean, we have to bring it back to the board in a minute, but I will say that one of the things that disappointed me is that Community Circle didn't really submit work samples. At least what was on the web as their submission was their report, their actual proposal, and then a repetition again of their qualifications. And I am concerned because the proposal is the only thing we have written from them, and it is not well organized. I absolutely appreciate the public participation. I think it is vital that we get good public participation, but we have to remember that ultimately we're going to have a product out of this, and that product needs to be equally solid. And I'm worried that we haven't seen what they can do.
I was
Can I just
disappointed.
interject? If you look at their submittal, they list about 30 of their sample projects.
They do, but we don't have
No.
those actual projects. We don't have, VHB and Brown Walker gave us the actual documents, the actual plans to look at
Well,
in
can we
electronic
ask
form.
them to submit these?
Yeah, but not before we vote tonight.
Well, I'd like Bill to check
Well,
down in Grad Street.
No,
to see-
it should be you who checks these reports.
Yeah.
But I don't have them.
Well,
But they're
exactly, no
enunciated
one
here.
does, yes.
Should I call them and get them?
I know that this is a month late, but I hear a lot of maybe doubt, and maybe not 100% confidence in some of these votes. I'm thinking, is there a reason that 2 weeks will make a difference? Or I don't know, whatever it takes.
As long as the members of the master plan committee are willing to work hard to make up the time.
We vote. We're the people that are hiring these people.
Right, we are. I
The
agree.
question
Input from
about
Sharon.
references, though, is that we really have to, I mean, I'd be thrilled to talk to the planning director in Watertown, because I think that's a particular close situation, and he's listed as reference, and I anticipate that he could.
If you want to wait 2 more weeks for reference checks.
But I mean, if I don't call him
and
and Bill says, he says it's fine, that sort of preference is not, doesn't help me any.
So are you wanting to personally call the references?
Well, I'm just saying that if you, to get the feeling of a reference, having someone else, yes.
And just make a suggestion that you vote subject to references.
Yeah, that would
vote
actually.
tonight and then check references.
Well, there's two
somebody check out.
things. Yeah, there's two things we could do. We could eliminate Brown Walker, because it doesn't sound like anybody wants to have Brown Walker. And then have Bill check the references of the other two, and we could vote on the 26th.
And get a
get
sample
a
of whether or
work
not
sample.
they know how to write.
Yeah, and get a work sample from the community circle team. So, or work samples, because they're multiple firms. We could do that. And then that would allow us to vote on the 26th. How many public hearings do we have on the 26th?
One, but we have several discussions.
What time does the first public hearing start?
7.
So we could actually have the vote when we first start the meeting.
Yeah.
Do minutes and all of that, have the vote.
Yep.
Okay. I can be persuaded.
Can I, you put this thing together.
I did put that thing together. I even filled it out.
I actually filled out a score sheet. I didn't have that score sheet, but I used the RFP and went through the elements and assigned a rating and came up with my choice.
Being fairly idiosyncratic, of course, is I made my own matrix and then promptly changed it as I was writing it. But yes. Do you want to hear my scores?
No, I think I'd like to see all of them, put them together, and have that part of your discussion on the 26th.
I didn't do a numerical score.
Well, you have to.
Based on what people now think is important.
Right.
You know, having heard the
You've heard
presentation.
them, go back and do them now.
Well, what you have to use is the evaluation criteria. Right?
That's where it came from. Come on.
You've only got, yeah, you do,
Yeah.
okay. No, I was looking at
Yeah,
these.
that's the scope. So
Okay,
they had to
that-
show
yes.
the required scope of work
Right,
and then the
exactly
criteria.
right.
Yes.
So that's, yeah.
I totally know what I'm doing.
Okay, well, so that's what.
One being community, you took number 2 being BHB, and number 3 being Brown Walker. You have the numerical score, you've
No.
heard them.
1, 2, 3
Is the numerical
is the
score.
criteria, that's the numerical
Oh, so
score. You're
each
supposed to
sheet
do
is-
one for
So it's
each.
one sheet for everyone.
One for each
Which I
group.
did, but I didn't numerical, I just wrote notes.
No, that's fine. So you can now go back and assign numbers. Yes, Ed, sorry.
It's fresh in our minds tonight, it'll be less fresh in 2 weeks. So we see tonight.
Back to the board at this point, because it's our decision to move forward, yes.
I move that we choose VHB, I'm sorry, VHB as the our employee.
Should move for a vote first, right?
That's his motion, yeah. Yeah, it's not a public hearing, we don't have to close it, so. Got a motion on the table to have VHB as our preferred consultant?
All right, I'm going to
Do you have a
second that.
For
Okay.
discussion.
Yes, for discussion. Discussion.
I still like my community circle.
I don't understand why we're moving the motion. Why don't we move from motion for a vote and let people vote on who they want to vote for?
He just did.
But he wants, all right, so we
He-
vote
he
yea or
moved
nay
that-
on VHB.
He votes yea or nay on VHB. Discussion?
I've discussed.
Okay. So what I'm hearing from the board, because I'm on a.
He said it was subject to reference checks.
Did you say it's subject? You did
Well,
not say it.
why don't you say it, Ed? All right.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I move that we choose VHB as our consultant, subject to reference checks.
I second the motion.
Okay. Any further discussion? Bill, you are our town planner, you have a voice.
No vote, but a voice.
Yes,
Who's doing those checks?
you are.
You said that was clear. You kept your voice.
You have to understand, the person who raises their hand gets the job.
Right, exactly. We thought you were volunteering.
The chairman wanted to make the call, which is why I asked the question.
Well, you could.
Actually, I could.
You could.
I don't mind
Maybe
making
it'd
the
be
call.
better to make the call, and I understand what Alex said about getting a direct response from somebody to understand the gist of the impression of the people that work for them. But maybe you could call them and ask them to send it as a brief email response that copies everybody. So I'm sure somebody would write, our experience with VHB or Circle was well, and this small point to that small point, they lacked it, and in probably 3 or 4 sentences, and from that, we'd all get an impression of how they felt about it.
I don't think that.
Rather
Most
put
people
that-
No one will put it in writing.
There's
I suppose,
confidentiality
that's
for
good. That's a
references.
good point. That's
Tell you
good.
what, there's clearly a split on the board. It's not gonna kill us to wait 2 more weeks.
There's a motion on the table.
I know there's a motion on the table. I'm going to ask to see if there's going to be a withdrawal of said
We
motion.
could table the motion.
We could table the motion, if you would prefer to table the motion rather than having it withdrawn, but, you know, it's not town meeting, we're allowed to table.
I think that, waiting, I have no problem with waiting 2 weeks. I do think that I mean, it will be less fresh, but
Yeah, well, I think the
people
idea
can
is.
review the documents again, which I think is going to help convince a lot of people.
I was going to say, I think it's too important a decision to make it if it's a split board. So either Bill or I will call the references for these 2 teams, not for Brown Walker, and then we'll vote at the next
How about if we
meeting.
do this on the reference?
Yes.
How about Bill calls, whether it's the town planner in Watertown, and says, I have 5 members of the planning board, would you be willing to entertain a call from any of them?
They won't do that. It's all confidentiality. Think if you're doing a corporate reference now, they pretty much just give,
So how
dates of.
is Bill gonna get our reference?
Well, because Bill's the town
He's
planner.
gonna speak to Bill, but he wouldn't speak to me.
Probably not, no. It's the same thing when you're hiring somebody, it's just
That's
names and
unfortunate.
dates of employment these days, so. Well,
Shall we table the motion, Ed?
you want to table your motion, Ed? You don't want to table it? You know it's going to fail, right?
Well, no, but we don't want it to fail, Ed.
You don't want it to fail, because then you can't bring it back.
There'll be no resolutions.
Well,
I
look, a failed motion is worse than no motion at all.
Failed VHB would mean would.
So let's not give VHB
The 3 people that don't vote for
a
VHB.
negative
I'm
mark
assuming would vote for the
until
only
we
other
do
choice.
because
No,
Emily's
I
not
think do.
willing to go forward yet. Let's
I want to see a work product.
let's table it.
Okay, we'll table it.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
If we,
Wait. before
if we
go.
have an idea
We have
that comes up after this, who do we contact?
Fire off an email to me. You all
Okay.
have my email address.
You'll distribute.
Thank you all very, very,
Yes,
very
thank you very
much. We are adjourned.
Any